The Chandelier, true story warning. This is a true story. I'm changing the names to protect my family, but everything I'm about to tell you actually happened. In 2017, my family inherited a mansion in Lomas de Chapultepec, one of Mexico City's wealthiest neighborhoods. We thought we were lucky. We were wrong. By the end of our first night, we knew something was watching us. After 6 years, my grandmother tried to kill my little sister. And when we finally escaped, we discovered we'd left something behind. Something that's still there, waiting. This is the story of the Chandelier. And if you ever find yourself in Lomas de Chapultepec, looking at a beautiful old mansion with a massive crystal chandelier, walk away. Because some houses don't let you leave. My name is Isabella Moreno. I was 19 years old when we moved into that house. A sophomore studying architecture at UNAM, dreaming of designing buildings that would last centuries. I never imagined I'd end up living in one that should have been torn down decades ago. June 2017. That's when our lives changed forever. Not gradually the way most life changes happen, but all at once, like stepping off a cliff you didn't know was there. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the library sketching elevation drawings for a project when my phone buzzed. Dad. He never called during the day unless something was wrong. Isabella. His voice shook. Not with fear, with something else. Disbelief, maybe. We need to talk. Come home. Home was a cramped, two-bedroom apartment in Claveria, a working-class neighborhood where the walls were so thin we could hear our neighbors' arguments and their reconciliations in equal detail. Mom taught elementary school. Dad had worked in sales until 3 months ago when his company downsized. We were 6 months behind on rent. Our landlord had stopped returning Mom's calls. When I walked into our apartment that evening, both my parents were sitting at the kitchen table. That's how I knew it was serious. They never just sat, not in the middle of the day. "There's been a death," Mom said. She looked at Dad like she was still processing the information herself. "Your father's cousin, Rodrigo." I had to think for a moment. "Uncle Rodrigo, the one who—" "We never met him," Dad interrupted. "He was my father's cousin's son. Technically my second cousin, but your grandfather always called him Cousin Rodrigo." He paused, running his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as stress. "He died 2 weeks ago. Heart attack. He was 58. "I'm sorry," I said, though I couldn't mourn a man I'd never known existed until that moment. "He left us his house." Dad said it flat, like he still didn't believe it. His attorney called today. "Rodrigo had no children, no siblings, no living parents. We're his closest relatives. The house is ours." The house, not an apartment, not a condo, a house. "Where?" I asked. "Lomas de Chapultepec." I stared at him. Lomas de Chapultepec, where the wealthy live behind high walls and security gates, where politicians and business magnates built mansions with views of Chapultepec Park, where our family could never afford even a month's rent. "There has to be a mistake," I said. "No mistake." Dad pulled out a folder, slid papers across the table. Legal documents, property deeds, photographs. "It's a 3-story Spanish colonial, built in 1942, fully paid off. It's ours." I looked at the photographs. Stone facade, arched windows, a courtyard with a fountain. And in one interior shot I could see it, a massive chandelier, red crystal, catching the camera flash, hanging like a frozen explosion in the center of an enormous foyer. "Why would he leave this to us?" I asked. "If we never even met him?" Mom and Dad exchanged a glance. The attorney couldn't say. Rodrigo lived alone for the last 20 years. No visitors, according to the neighbors. He just lived there, and then he didn't. "How did he die?" My younger sister Camila appeared in the doorway. She was 11 small for her age, with our mother's dark eyes and an unnerving habit of appearing silently in doorways. "Was he murdered?" "Camila," Mom's voice was sharp. "Don't say things like that." "The attorney said heart attack," Dad said. "Found in his bedroom, natural causes." But Camila was looking at the photographs now, her small fingers touching the image of the chandelier. "This house looks sad," she said quietly. Houses can't be sad, mija. Mom tried to smile. This one can. We moved in 2 weeks later. We had no choice, really. The eviction notice came 3 days after the attorney's call. We could contest it, our landlord said with false sympathy. But why would we? We had a mansion now. The moving truck arrived late, so it was already dark when we pulled up to the address. June 15th. The same date Uncle Rodrigo had purchased the property, though we didn't know that yet. 20 years exactly. Lomas de Chapultepec at night is a different world. Streetlights glow behind jacaranda trees. High walls hide whatever happens behind them. Our house, I still couldn't think of it as ours, sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac set back from the road. The iron gate creaked when Dad pushed it open. No rust, just age. The sound echoed in the empty street. Camila grabbed my hand. "It's okay," I whispered, though I didn't know if I believed it. The front courtyard was overgrown. Bougainvillea had consumed the fountain-purple flowers, covering what must have once been a cherub's face. Dead leaves crunched under our feet. In the center, the fountain was dry, filled with rainwater, gone stagnant and black. The front door was wood-heavy, with a stained glass window set into it. An angel on one side, a figure in shadow on the other. The contrast was stark uncomfortable. Angels should be depicted with light, not darkness. Dad fumbled with the keys the attorney had given us. The lock was stiff, unused. When the door finally opened, it released a breath of air that smelled wrong. Not just musty or old, something underneath that. Something sweet and rotten like flowers left too long in a vase. "Ugh," Camilla said, covering her nose. "It stinks." "Just needs to air out," Mom said, but she looked uncertain. I stepped inside first. Architecture student instinct, I wanted to see the bones of the place before the emotional reality set in. The foyer opened up to 3 stories, a massive space that should have felt grand, but instead felt cavernous empty. And there, dominating everything, was the chandelier. 7 tiers of Moreno glass blood-red crystal that caught our flashlight beams and threw them back in fractured patterns across the walls. 300 years old, the attorney had said. Venetian. Worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. It hung from the 3rd-floor ceiling on a thick chain, suspended over the marble floor like a sword waiting to drop. Jesus, Dad breathed. He was a practical man, not given to poetry, but even he could feel it. That thing is incredible. "It's watching us," Camila said. "Don't be dramatic, mija." But Mom's voice was thin. I tilted my head back, trying to see where the chain attached to the ceiling. Too high, too dark. But for just a moment I thought I saw something move up there. A flutter like fabric caught in a breeze. But there was no breeze. All the windows were closed, had been closed for months. "Let's get the lights on," Dad said, finding a switch. The chandelier blazed to life, and I had to look away. It was too bright, too red, like staring into a wound. We brought in boxes until midnight, exhausted. The house was bigger than we'd imagined. Room after room, most still furnished. Uncle Rodrigo had left everything: furniture, dishes, books, clothes. It was like he'd simply walked out one day expecting to return. Camila refused to sleep in any room that faced the foyer. "I can feel it looking," she insisted. Mom gave in, letting her take a small bedroom at the back of the house overlooking the overgrown garden. My room was on the 2nd floor, large with tall windows and a view of the street. I could see the house across from us, boarded up, ivy consuming its facade. Nobody lived there. Nobody had for years, by the look of it. I unpacked until I couldn't keep my eyes open, then collapsed onto the bed without changing. The mattress was too soft, too old. I sank into it like quicksand. Sleep came fast but didn't stay. I woke to sound. Not a loud sound. Delicate, musical. The soft clink of crystal touching crystal. My phone said 11:47 p.m. I'd been asleep less than an hour. The sound came from below, from the foyer. I knew without seeing the chandelier was moving. I got up, opened my door. The hallway was dark. Dad hadn't figured out all the light switches yet. I could see the glow from the foyer at the end of the hall where the staircase curved down. The sound continued, clink, 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 like wind chimes, but there was no wind. The house was sealed tight against the night. I should have gone back to bed, should have told myself it was the house settling old chains, adjusting normal sounds, magnified by exhaustion and nerves. But I didn't. I walked down the hall, drawn by something I couldn't name. At the top of the stairs I could see it. The chandelier swaying slightly. Not much, just enough to make the crystal pieces touch to create that sound. Back and forth, back and forth, back and... Like a pendulum counting down to something. I started down the stairs, one hand on the banister. The marble steps were cold through my socks. As I descended, the chandelier grew larger, more imposing. By the time I reached the bottom, I was standing directly beneath it. 7 tiers of crystal hung above my head, each piece sharp enough to cut if it fell. I looked up into its depths. Red glass reflected red glass in infinite regression. And somewhere in that reflection I saw the doorbell rang. The sound was so sudden, so wrong at this hour that I stumbled backward. My heart hammered against my ribs. The doorbell rang again, insistent. I heard movement upstairs. Dad appeared at the top of the stairs, disheveled, half asleep. Who the hell is that at midnight? I don't know. He came down, moving past me to the front door. Through the stained glass I could see a figure. A woman, I thought, alone. Dad opened the door. She was old, maybe 60, maybe older. Hard to tell in the porch light that flickered, like it couldn't decide whether to stay on or give up entirely. She wore a long black coat despite the warm night, and her hair hung in gray sheets past her shoulders. "I'm your neighbor," she said. Her voice was rough, like gravel scraping. From across the street, I glanced at the boarded house. That house. I keep the keys. She didn't look at Dad, didn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on something behind us, the chandelier. I kept them for Rodrigo when the house was empty. Now I return them to you. She held out her hand. In her palm were 2 brass keys, old and heavy, attached to a ring. "Keys to what?" Dad asked. "The room below." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were strange, too light, almost colorless in the dim light. "Don't open it after dark. Don't ever." "What room?" But she was already turning away, moving down the steps with surprising speed for someone her age. "Wait," Dad called. "Which house are you?" She didn't answer, didn't look back. She walked through the gate and across the street toward the boarded house. I watched her disappear into its shadow. Dad closed the door, looking at the keys in his hand. That was strange. "The house across the street is abandoned," I said. "Look at it." He looked. The boards over the windows, the ivy, the dark. Maybe she lives somewhere else on the street. Maybe she's confused. "Dad, she knew Uncle Rodrigo. She knew about this house." "Then we'll ask her tomorrow." He set the keys on the foyer table. "It's too late for this. Go to bed, Isabella." But I didn't go to bed. Not right away. I stood in the foyer after Dad went upstairs, looking at those keys, brass tarnished with age, and on the handle of each engraved in tiny script words in Latin. I pulled out my phone, zoomed in, photographed them, ran them through translation. Claustra animarum, prison of souls. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at those words, and from somewhere above the chandelier began to sway again. This time I could feel it. A cold current of air that shouldn't exist moving down from the ceiling, wrapping around me like fingers. I ran upstairs, shut my door, locked it, but I could still hear it, all night. The sound of crystal touching crystal, a sound like warning. Morning brought sunlight and the illusion of normalcy. We unpacked in exhausted silence, each of us too tired to discuss the strangeness of the night before. But it was there unspoken in the way we avoided the foyer, the way Camilla refused to walk under the chandelier. By afternoon we'd made progress. Boxes emptied, clothes in closets, dishes in cabinets. Mom hung pictures in the living room, 6 framed family photos, memories of better times. 2 landscape paintings she'd bought at a garage sale years ago. She arranged them carefully on the wall opposite the windows where the light would catch them. "There," she said, stepping back. "Now it feels more like home." Camilla was quieter than usual. She sat on the stairs watching the foyer, watching the chandelier. "What's wrong, mija?" I asked, sitting beside her. "I saw her," Camilla said quietly. "Saw who?" "The girl, last night, after everyone went to sleep." My skin prickled. "What girl?" "She was standing right there." Camilla pointed to the corner of the foyer where shadows gathered even in daylight. She was looking at the chandelier. She was maybe 10, black hair really long, and she was wearing this white dress, but it was old-fashioned, like from a movie. "Camilla, you were dreaming." "I wasn't asleep." She looked at me, and her eyes were too serious for 11 years old. "She didn't have feet, Isabella. She was floating, just a little bit, and when she looked at me, her eyes were all black, no white part at all." "That's enough." Mom's voice was sharp. She'd been listening from the doorway. "No more scary stories." "I'm not making it up." "Then it was a dream. This is a new house. Everyone's stressed. Our minds play tricks, that's all." But Camilla shook her head. "She told me her name." The air in the room changed. Even Mom stopped moving. She said her name was Catalina, and this was her house. She died here. Upstairs, now. Mom's voice left no room for argument. Camilla went, but slowly, looking back at the foyer like she expected to see something there. Mom looked at me. "Find out if anyone named Catalina lived here. Look it up online. Whatever you find, don't tell Camilla." I went to my laptop, opened Google, typed Catalina Vega, Lomas de Chapultepec, 1962, death. The first result was a scanned newspaper article from El Universal dated August 15, 1962. "Girl 10 dies in chandelier accident." There was a photograph, black and white grainy. A young girl with long dark hair wearing a white dress. She was smiling in the photo. Below it, the caption, "Catalina Vega 10 was pronounced dead at the scene." The article was brief. Catalina had been found hanging from the chandelier's chain on the 3rd floor. The article called it an accident. She'd apparently climbed onto the railing, tried to reach the chandelier, and somehow got caught in the chain. Death by strangulation. Immediate. Her parents had a maid, Dolores, something last name illegible in the scan. The maid had been acting strangely, the article said, talking to herself, leaving offerings of food in empty rooms. After Catalina's death, the maid disappeared, never found. I sat back from my laptop feeling cold. Camilla couldn't have known this. She couldn't have. We'd just moved in. She'd never been here before. That night I couldn't eat dinner, couldn't focus on anything but the chandelier hanging there in the foyer like it was waiting. Dad noticed me staring at it. "It's just a light fixture," he said. "Expensive, but that's all. A girl died from it." He stopped chewing. "What?" I showed him the article, watched his face change as he read. "This was 60 years ago," he said finally. "It's history. Tragic, but—" Camilla described her perfectly. Before I found this. We both looked at Camilla, who was pushing food around her plate, not eating. "A coincidence," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She probably saw a photo somewhere before we moved in." "There are no photos. I checked. This was the only one online, and I found it in newspaper archives." Mom took the laptop, read the article herself. Her hand went to her mouth. "That poor child." "We should talk to someone," I said. "Maybe a priest or—" "We're not calling a priest." Dad's voice was firm. "We're not doing this. It's a new house. We're all stressed. That's all this is." But that night after everyone went to bed, I lay awake and listened. And at 11:47, the same time as the night before, I heard it begin. The chandelier swaying, the crystal singing its warning song. I got up, opened my door. The hallway stretched before me dark except for the glow from the foyer. I walked to the stairs, looked down. The chandelier was moving more than before, not just swaying, rotating slowly like something was pushing it from above. And as I watched, one of the crystal pieces detached. It fell in slow motion, tumbling end over end, catching the light, beautiful and deadly. It hit the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. The crystal didn't shatter completely. It broke into 3 large pieces, each one sharp as a blade. I heard footsteps behind me. Dad, Mom, Camila, all emerging from their rooms. "What was that?" Mom's voice shook. "The chandelier," I pointed down. "A piece fell." We went down together, staying close. The crystal lay on the floor in a small pool of refracted light. Dad knelt, picked up the largest piece. It left a small cut on his palm, a line of blood welling up. "We should have it inspected," Mom said. "Make sure it's secure." But I was looking up, looking at the chandelier, and there, just for a moment, I saw it. A small hand gripping one of the chains. A child's hand, pale as death. It released the chain and pulled back into the darkness above. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words caught in my throat, because I realized something with absolute certainty. The crystal hadn't fallen. It had been dropped. Dropped exactly where I'd been standing 10 minutes earlier. If I hadn't moved, it would have killed me. Morning of the second day brought our first undeniable proof. Mom was always an early riser. She went downstairs at 6:30 a.m. to make coffee. Her scream brought us all running. The living room. All 6 family photographs had been taken down from the wall. They weren't on the floor. They were leaning against the wall, facing inward, so all we could see were the backs of the frames, arranged in a perfect line. The 2 landscape paintings were still hanging, untouched. Only the photos of people had been moved. "Who did this?" Mom's voice was sharp with fear, trying to sound like anger. She rounded on Camila. "Was this you?" "No, I was asleep." "Then how?" "Maybe they fell," Dad said, but even he didn't sound convinced. He went to examine the wall. "The nails are still here, still secure. Someone took them down, deliberately." "We were all asleep," I said. "All our doors were closed. How could someone—" "There's no one else here." Dad's voice was rising. "It's just us." So one of us did this, one of us is playing games. But we all knew. We could see it in each other's faces. None of us had done this. Dad rehung the photographs, checked each nail twice. They're not going anywhere. We went about our day in tense silence, unpacking, organizing, pretending everything was normal. But every time I walked through the living room, I glanced at those photos. Still hanging, still secure. Until the next morning. 6:30 a.m., Mom's scream. The same scream like a recording on loop. All 6 photographs taken down, facing the wall. This happened every morning for 5 days. On the 5th morning, Mom didn't even scream. She just stood there staring at the photographs, her coffee cup shaking in her hand. "This isn't possible," she whispered. That night she locked the living room door, kept the key in her pocket while she slept. But at 6:30 a.m., when she unlocked the door, the photographs were down. The door had stayed locked all night. But something had been inside. On day 7, Camila spoke up at breakfast. "I know who's doing it." We all stopped, looked at her. "It's Catalina, the girl I told you about." Camila's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. "She doesn't like our pictures. She says this isn't our house, it's hers." "Camila, please." Mom's voice broke. "Don't. You don't believe me, but she's real. She talks to me every night. She's sad. She wants to go home, but she can't because—" "Enough!" Dad slammed his hand on the table. "There is no Catalina. There is no ghost. This is our house, and we're going to live here like a normal family." But his voice shook. We all heard it. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening. And at exactly 11:47 I heard it. The chandelier. Always the chandelier. I got up, went to the door, but this time I didn't open it. I just listened. Footsteps on the stairs. Small footsteps, like a child. Then silence. Then very softly humming. A child's voice humming a melody I didn't recognize. It moved through the house, coming closer to my door. I held my breath. The humming stopped right outside. The doorknob turned, slowly, testing, but I'd locked it. A small voice muffled through the door. "Let me in." I didn't breathe, didn't move. "I just want to talk. Please let me in." The voice was sweet, innocent, a child's voice asking for help. But underneath it I heard something else, something old and hungry. "No," I whispered. Silence. Then, "You can't stay here. None of you can. This is my house. Mine." Footsteps moving away. The humming starting again, fading down the hallway. I stayed frozen until sunrise. In the morning I found my doorknob had turned green. Tarnished overnight like decades of decay had happened in hours. And on the wood around it 5 small handprints, child-sized, the color of ash. I didn't tell anyone. Day 12. Dad found Uncle Rodrigo's journal. He'd been going through the study, sorting papers, deciding what to keep. The journal was in the bottom drawer of the desk, hidden under tax returns from 2005. Leather-bound, yellowed pages. The last entries dated June 3rd, 2017, 2 days before Uncle Rodrigo died. Dad read it silently first, then his face went white. "We need to read this," he said. "All of us." We gathered in the living room. Dad read aloud. The journal started normally enough. Rodrigo's thoughts on his work, his garden, mundane details. But around 2002, the entries changed. March 15th, 2002. 5 years since I moved in. I thought I was imagining it at first. The chandelier moving, the sounds. But tonight I saw her, a girl, standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. She didn't speak, just looked. When I called out, she disappeared. March 22nd, 2002. She's there every night now, always watching. I found old newspaper articles, Catalina Vega. She died here in 1962. But why is she still here? Why won't she leave August 10th, 2002? I made a mistake. I opened the room beneath the stairs, the one that's always locked. I found things there, old things. A television from the 1980s, children's toys, and photographs of Catalina. Someone kept her belongings there. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is now she knows I found them. And she's angry. September 3rd, 2002, I can't sleep anymore. She's in my dreams, in my room. Sometimes I wake up and she's standing by my bed just watching. Her eyes are black, all black, no white at all. What is she? October 15th, 2002. I locked the keys away. I won't open that room again. But it doesn't matter. She doesn't need doors. She's everywhere, in every shadow, every reflection. The chandelier swings every night. I've had it reinforced 3 times. The engineers say it's perfectly safe, but I know. I know it's trying to fall, trying to finish what it started. The entries became more erratic, harder to read, sometimes just fragments. She wants me to open the door. She keeps asking every night, "Open the door, let us out." Us. There's more than one. I won't open it. Never. Whatever's in there needs to stay locked. The final entry dated June 3rd, 2017. I can't fight anymore. I'm so tired. It's been 15 years of this. Every single night. I see her, I hear her. The chandelier, always the chandelier. She tells me I could end it. I could just stand beneath it, let it fall, like she did. Like she wants everyone to do. To whoever reads this, don't open the room beneath the stairs. Whatever you do, no matter what you hear, don't open it. They're waiting. They've always been waiting. And if you let them out... The entry ended there. 2 days later, Rodrigo was found dead in his bedroom. According to the autopsy report, he'd strangled himself with his own hands. We sat in silence after Dad finished reading. "We need to leave," Mom said finally. "Right now. We pack up and we go." "Go where?" Dad's voice was hollow. "We have nowhere else. We're broke. This house is all we have. Then we find somewhere, anywhere. We can't stay here. We're not letting a dead girl scare us out of our own house." But Dad's hands were shaking. "This is psychological. It's all in our heads." Rodrigo was disturbed, paranoid. He made himself believe in this, and it drove him crazy. We won't make the same mistake. "Isabella saw her," Camilla said quietly. "Last night, outside her door. I heard it from my room." Everyone looked at me. "I don't know what I heard," I said carefully, because I didn't want to confirm what I knew, because saying it out loud would make it real. "Tell them," Camilla insisted. "I heard footsteps and humming, and someone tried my doorknob. And..." Mom's voice was tight. "And nothing. I didn't open the door. In the morning there were handprints on it, small, like a child's. Dad stood up abruptly. I'll prove it. I'll prove there's nothing here. He went to the foyer table, grabbed the 2 brass keys the old woman had given us. Dad, don't, I started. The journal says don't open the room. Fine. But I need to see what's in there. I need to know what we're dealing with. If it's just some old toys and photographs, then we'll know Rodrigo was just paranoid, and we can put this to rest. Rodrigo said not to open it, Mom pleaded. Rodrigo was crazy. But Dad's voice lacked conviction. We followed him to the space beneath the stairs. I'd noticed the small door before, but never thought much about it. Just a storage closet. But looking at it now, I saw it was different from other doors in the house. Older, the wood darker, and there barely visible scratch marks around the handle, like someone had tried to claw their way out from the inside. Dad inserted the first key. It turned with a heavy click. Then the second key. Another click. The door swung open on its own, slowly, like something on the other side was pulling it. A yellow light spilled out, dim, flickering, like candlelight, but there were no candles. And from inside, I heard it. Music. Soft. A piano melody. Sad. Familiar. Like a lullaby twisted into something mournful. Dad took a step toward the opening. Behind us, the chandelier suddenly dropped, not fell, but dropped deliberately, jerking downward on its chain with a sound like a gunshot. It stopped 2 feet lower than before, swaying wildly, crystal pieces colliding in a deafening cacophony. And from inside the room beneath the stairs, I heard laughter, a child's laughter, but not joyful. Hungry. Dad stepped back from the door. His face had gone gray. "Close it," he whispered. "Close it, now." But before any of us could move, before the door could swing shut, a small hand emerged from the darkness inside, pale, impossibly pale, with fingernails grown long and yellowed. It reached out, grasping, and wrapped its fingers around Dad's ankle. Dad screamed. The sound tore from his throat raw, an animal nothing like the controlled man I'd known my entire life. The pale hand, too small, too cold, too wrong, had locked around his ankle with a grip strength that couldn't belong to a child. He kicked, thrashed, but the hand held firm fingers digging into his flesh through the fabric of his jeans, and it was pulling, slowly, inexorably, dragging him toward that open door and the flickering yellow light beyond. "Help me!" Dad's voice cracked as his shoes scraped against the marble floor, leaving black skid marks. "Get it off! Get it off!" Mom lunged forward, grabbing Dad's arms. I grabbed his waist. Camilla stood frozen, mouth open, in a silent scream, her small hands pressed against her ears. The tug of war lasted seconds that felt like hours. Dad's body was the rope. On one end, Mom and I pulled with everything we had. On the other end, that thing in the darkness pulled back. I could see more of the arm now, bone-thin skin stretched tight and translucent like old parchment veins visible underneath in a sickly blue-green network. "Let go of him!" I screamed at the doorway. "Let go!" The pulling stopped, just like that. The hand released. Dad stumbled backward, and we all went down in a heap on the foyer floor. The door to the room beneath the stairs slammed shut with a sound like a coffin lid. The piano music cut off mid-note. Silence, heavy, oppressive, wrong. Dad was hyperventilating, curled on his side, hands clutching his ankle. When he pulled up his pant leg, we saw it. 5 perfect finger marks, not bruises, burns. The flesh was blistered and raw, each fingerprint seared into his skin like a brand. "Hospital?" Mom's voice shook. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No." Dad's voice was barely a whisper. "No hospitals. They'll ask questions. They'll think I'm insane." "You're hurt. You need—" I said no. He pushed himself up, face contorted with pain and something else. Fear. Pure, undiluted terror. The kind that strips away pretense and leaves only the primitive animal brain screaming for survival. "We're not telling anyone about this. Do you understand? Not anyone." He limped to the kitchen, Mom supporting him. I heard water running. The medicine cabinet opening, soft murmurs too low to make out words. I stood alone in the foyer, staring at the door beneath the stairs. It looked innocuous now. Just old wood, just a door. But I could still smell it, that sweet, rotten smell that had wafted out when it opened, like decay masked with perfume. Camilla tugged my sleeve. Her face was pale, eyes too wide. "She's angry now," my sister whispered. "Catalina, she's really, really angry." "How do you know?" "Because she told me." Camilla pointed upward. I followed her finger. There at the top of the third-floor railing, barely visible in the shadows, a small figure. Dark hair, white dress, standing perfectly still, hands gripping the banister, watching us. I blinked. The figure was gone, but written on the wall behind where she'd stood in something that looked wet and dark, a message. Large, jagged letters like a child had written with their fingers. "You opened it. Opened." That night none of us slept. We gathered in the master bedroom, all four of us, doors locked, lights blazing. Dad sat on the edge of the bed, his bandaged ankle propped on a pillow. The burns had been worse than we initially thought. Mom had wanted to call an ambulance. Dad refused. Instead, he'd cleaned and dressed the wound himself with shaking hands, downing 3 glasses of whiskey in the process. "We're not staying here," Mom said. Her voice had that brittle quality that meant she was one word away from breaking entirely. "I don't care where we go. My sister in Puebla, a motel, the street, anywhere but here." "And then what?" Dad's words slurred slightly. "The whiskey. We have no money. This house is our only asset. If we leave, we lose everything. If we stay, we might lose more than everything. There has to be an explanation, a rational explanation. Gas leak, carbon monoxide, something that makes people hallucinate. You have burn marks on your ankle." Mom's voice rose. "Shaped like fingers of something that grabbed you from inside a locked room. How do you explain that rationally?" Dad had no answer. He just stared at his bandaged foot jaw working like he was chewing words he couldn't swallow. Camilla sat in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, whispering something under her breath. I moved closer to hear. "Not supposed to open it, not supposed to wake them up, not supposed to—" "Camilla," I touched her shoulder gently. "Who's them? Is it more than just Catalina?" My sister looked at me. In the harsh bedroom light, I could see dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. She looked older, haunted. "Catalina's not alone down there," Camilla said quietly. "There are others. 3 others. Children. They've been trapped for a long time. Since before Catalina. And they're so hungry." "Hungry for what?" Camilla's lips trembled. "For a way out." Morning arrived whether we wanted it to or not. Pale light filtered through the curtains. Dad had finally passed out around 4 a.m., still sitting up, empty whiskey glass in his lap. Mom dozed fitfully beside him. Camilla had curled into a ball at the foot of the bed, face pressed against her knees. I was the only one still awake when I heard it. The doorbell. My entire body went rigid. After last night, that sound had taken on a sinister quality. Nothing good came through the front door. I crept out of the bedroom, down the stairs. Through the stained glass window, I could see a figure, not the old woman from the first night. This was different, shorter, broader, male. I opened the door, a cracked chain still attached. A man in his 60s stood on the porch holding a toolbox. He wore coveralls with Electricista Ramirez embroidered on the pocket. "Buenos dias," he said with a professional smile. "I'm here to check the electrical system. The previous owner's attorney arranged it." "Standard safety inspection after property transfer." I'd forgotten. The attorney had mentioned this, some kind of mandatory inspection. "Now's not a good time," I started. "I'll only take an hour. It's required by law before you can transfer utilities to your name. Otherwise, you'll have issues with the power company." I hesitated, but he was right. We needed electricity. And he looked normal, safe, like a piece of the regular world I desperately wanted back. I let him in. He set his toolbox down in the foyer, glancing up at the chandelier. Impressive piece, Moreno glass, if I'm not mistaken. They don't make them like this anymore. Can you check it? The question came out before I could stop it. Make sure it's secure. That's not really my specialty, but I can take a look. He pulled out a ladder from his truck, set it up beneath the chandelier. As he climbed, I held the base, watching him examine the mounting bracket, the chain, the electrical connections. Everything looks solid, he called down. This was installed by masters. It's not going anywhere. But I saw him pause, squint, lean closer to one of the chains. That's odd, he muttered. What? There are marks on the chain. Fresh ones, like something's been pulling on it, hard. He ran his finger along the metal. And there's residue. Looks almost like skin cells, and is this hair? He descended the ladder quickly, looking unsettled. In his palm were several long black strands. Do you have a child living here, he asked. Because someone's been climbing on this, recently. The hair is caught in the links. I stared at the strands. They looked like the hair I'd seen in those newspaper photos of Catalina Vega. We just moved in, I said. There's been no one here but us. The electrician's professional demeanor cracked slightly. Miss, I've been doing this 30 years. I know when something's wrong with a house, and there's something wrong with this one. What do you mean? He glanced around, lowering his voice. I knew Rodrigo, the previous owner, did some work for him over the years. Good man, but tormented. He told me once after a few drinks that this house was cursed, that something had happened here long ago and it never left. Did he say what? No, but he warned me. Said if anything ever happened to him, I should tell the next owners to leave, not to stay, not for any reason. The electrician picked up his toolbox. I'm going to mark this inspection as incomplete. You'll get a notice to reschedule. But my advice, don't be here when that notice arrives. He left quickly, almost running to his truck. I stood in the foyer holding those strands of black hair and felt the weight of the house pressing down on me. Behind me I heard a soft giggle. When I turned, there was nothing there. But I could smell it, that sweet, rotten flower smell. And I knew with absolute certainty that we were running out of time. By day 3, after opening the door, the house had changed. Or maybe it had always been this way, and we were only now seeing it clearly. Lights stopped working, not all at once, gradually. The bulb in the second-floor hallway flickered and died. Then the kitchen. Then my bedroom. We replaced them, but the new bulbs burned out within hours. Soon only the foyer remained lit, the chandelier blazing red and bright, while the rest of the house descended into shadow. Doors wouldn't stay closed. We'd shut a door, firmly turn around, and find it hanging open. At night, we heard them throughout the house, opening, closing, a rhythm like breathing. The temperature dropped. In June, in Mexico City, we wore sweaters indoors. Our breath misted in the air. The thermostat read 18 degrees Celsius, but it felt like a freezer. And the sounds, God, the sounds, footsteps at all hours, small feet running up and down the stairs, children's laughter from empty rooms. Whispers in Spanish too quick and garbled to understand, and always, always that piano music, the same mournful melody drifting from somewhere deep in the walls. But worst were the phones. On day 4, Mom tried to call her sister in Puebla, to ask if we could stay with her, to get us out of this nightmare. But when she dialed, the call wouldn't connect, just static, thick, heavy static, and underneath it a voice, small, distant. Don't leave, don't leave, don't leave. She tried her cell phone, same result. My phone, Dad's phone, every device in the house. We could call out, but nothing connected. And every attempt was met with that same whispered message, don't leave. We were being isolated, cut off, trapped. Dad tried to dismiss it. Cell tower issues, solar flares, something technical. But his hands shook when he spoke. The burn marks on his ankle had gotten worse despite treatment. The blisters had spread, crawling up his leg in patterns that looked disturbingly like handprints layered on handprints, as if multiple small hands were grabbing him in his sleep. On day 5, I woke to find my laptop open on my desk. I hadn't touched it since the night before. The screen glowed in the darkness. A video was playing. Grainy footage, black and white, date stamp in the corner, August 14th, 1962. Home movie footage, a birthday party, balloons, a cake, a little girl, Catalina, smiling, blowing out candles, her parents singing, a woman in a maid's uniform standing in the background, unsmiling. That must have been Dolores. The footage jumped. Now it showed the same girl climbing the stairs, following someone off camera, going higher, to the third floor. The camera angle changed. Now it was pointing up, at the chandelier. Catalina stood on the railing, reaching for it. She was laughing, playing. Someone off camera was encouraging her. A woman's voice speaking Spanish, too rapid for me to catch. Then Catalina lost her balance. She grabbed the chain to steady herself, but instead of catching her, the chain wrapped around her neck. The weight of her body pulled it tight. She thrashed, kicked. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, and the camera just kept recording. For 3 minutes and 42 seconds, it recorded a child dying. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened in the last 10 seconds of the footage. Catalina's body went still, limp, hanging, and then slowly she raised her head, looked directly at the camera. Her eyes were completely black. Her mouth opened impossibly wide, and she spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. Something adult and ancient and furious, "Someone will pay." The video ended. My laptop shut down, wouldn't turn back on. I sat in the darkness, shaking, understanding now what Camila had been trying to tell us. Catalina hadn't died in an accident. She'd been murdered. Day 6 was when Camila stopped talking to us entirely. She only spoke to Catalina now. We'd find her in corners, whispering to empty air. Sometimes laughing at jokes we couldn't hear. Once Mom caught her on the third-floor railing, standing in the exact spot where Catalina had died. "Camila, get down from there!" Mom screamed. My sister looked back at us, but her expression was strange, distant, like she was drugged. "Catalina wants to show me something," she said dreamily. "She says it doesn't hurt. She says falling is like flying." Dad had to pull her down. She fought him, bit his hand hard enough to draw blood, screamed that we were keeping her from her friend, that Catalina was the only one who understood her. We locked her in her room after that for her own safety. But all night we heard her talking. 2 voices in conversation, Camila's, and another one, higher, older, speaking Spanish with an accent from decades past. In the morning, when we unlocked the door, we found the walls covered in drawings, crude, childish stick figures. But the content was horrifying. Pictures of children hanging from the chandelier. Not just Catalina. 4 different children, each one labeled with a name and a date. Maria, 1955 Diego, 1957 Carmen, 1959 Catalina, 1962. And at the bottom of the wall, in handwriting that wasn't Camila's, "She killed us all," below that a drawing of a woman. Tall, thin, long hair, a maid's uniform, and her face was scribbled out in violent black marks. Dolores, the maid who disappeared after Catalina's death. "She's a serial killer," I whispered. "She killed 4 children over 7 years. Made it look like accidents. And no one ever caught her." "But why?" Mom's voice was barely audible. "Why would she do that?" Camila answered from behind us, her voice flat and emotionless. "Because she was building something, a ritual, 4 children, 4 directions. North, south, east, west. Their souls trapped, bound to this house, bound to the chandelier. She was opening a door, and when she killed Catalina, she finished it." We all turned to look at my sister. She stood in the doorway of her room, but she seemed taller somehow, older. Her eyes were darker than usual. "Camila," I said carefully. She tilted her head at an unnatural angle. "Dolores thought if she fed us to the darkness, she could live forever. She thought she could cheat death, but she was wrong. The darkness took her too, and now we're all trapped together, in the room beneath the stairs, in the walls, in the chandelier." "Where's my daughter?" Mom's voice rose. "What did you do to Camila?" She's still here, we're just sharing. The thing wearing my sister's face smiled. Don't worry, we won't hurt her. We like her. She's sweet. She listens, not like you. You opened the door and you didn't even apologize. We're sorry, Dad said quickly. We didn't know. We'll close it. We'll lock it forever. Just please let my daughter go. It's too late to close it. You woke us up, and now we're hungry. Camilla's body convulsed. She dropped to the floor, twitching. When she looked up again, her eyes were her own. Tears streamed down her face. Help me, she sobbed. Please help me. They're in my head. They won't leave. They keep showing me things, terrible things, what Dolores did to them, how they died, one by one, and they want. Another convulsion, another voice different from the first. We want revenge. We want justice. We want someone to pay for what was done to us. Then a third voice, younger. But no one's left to punish except you. A fourth voice, barely a whisper. So you'll do. My sister's eyes rolled back. She collapsed. Mom ran to her, cradling her, crying, begging God or anyone who would listen to save her baby. And from every corner of the house we heard them. Children's voices, 4 of them, singing in unison. The same birthday song from the video, but the words were wrong. Las Mananitas, we sing to you. Now that you've woken, now that we're free, we'll sing to you until you join us beneath the chandelier for eternity. The singing grew louder, closer, coming from the walls themselves. The floor vibrated with it. And then from the foyer we heard it, the sound of chains sliding, metal scraping against metal. The chandelier, it was lowering itself. Slowly, deliberately, chain link by chain link, it descended from the ceiling crystal pieces, chiming like funeral bells. Dad limped to the foyer. We followed, watched in horror as the massive structure continued its descent, swaying gently, throwing red shadows across the walls. It stopped 3 feet from the floor, low enough that if someone were standing beneath it, "It's a trap," I breathed. "It wants us underneath it." As if in answer, all the doors in the house slammed shut simultaneously. We were locked in with it. The chandelier began to rotate, faster and faster until it was a blur of red crystal and shadows. And in that blur we saw them. 4 small faces, eyes black, mouths open, hands reaching, the children. They were in the chandelier now, part of it, bound to it for 60 years, and they were reaching for us. "Run!" Dad shouted. We ran, back toward the master bedroom, but the hallways had changed. Doors that should lead to rooms opened onto walls. Stairs went nowhere. The house was folding in on itself, herding us like cattle. We ended up back in the foyer, always back in the foyer. The chandelier waited, still rotating, still reaching. "There has to be a way out," Mom sobbed. She was carrying Camila now, my sister limp in her arms. "Please, my baby, my baby." I looked at the door beneath the stairs. It stood open. Yellow light spilled out brighter than before. And in that light I saw her, not Catalina, not any of the children, Dolores. The maid, the murderer, the one who'd started all of this. She stood in the doorway, solid and real, as if she'd never died at all. Her face was just as the newspapers had described, severe, angular, with eyes that held no warmth. Her maid's uniform was spotted with old blood. "You opened my door," she said. Her voice was crisp, unaccented Spanish. "You let them out. Do you know how long I've kept them contained? 65 years? 65 years of holding that door shut from the other side, and you undid it in seconds? You killed children," I spat. "You're a monster." I was offering them purpose, Dolores's dead eyes fixed on me. Children die every day, forgotten, meaningless. I gave 4 children immortality, their souls power, something greater than they could ever have been in life. You gave them torture. I gave them eternity, she smiled. And now they're free. Free to make others join them. Free to expand. This house will consume everyone who enters. And they'll all become part of the chandelier, part of my masterpiece. "Why?" I screamed. "Why do this?" "Because I was dying, cancer, terminal. The doctors gave me months. But I'd studied the old ways, The dark ways. I knew if I could bind enough souls to a location, to an object, I could anchor myself to the world, never move on, never face judgment. You trapped yourself here too? A small price for immortality. Dolores took a step forward. Now, join them, join me, or I'll make it hurt much worse. Behind her through the doorway I could see it, the room beneath the stairs, but it was bigger than it should be, much bigger. It extended back into impossible space, and in that space I saw others, dozens of others, shadows of people trapped over the years, all the previous owners, all the visitors, all consumed. This had been going on much longer than 60 years. No, Dad said. He stepped forward, putting himself between Dolores and his family. You want someone? Take me, but let them go. Dad, don't, I started. I'm the one who opened the door. I'm the one who woke them. It's my fault. So take me, just take me. Dolores cocked her head, considering. Noble, pointless, but noble. She raised her hand. Behind her, the 4 children emerged from the doorway. Catalina in front, the 3 others behind. They were more substantial now, almost solid. They walked toward Dad with jerking, unnatural movements. Say goodbye to your family, Dolores said. The children reached for Dad. Their hands were cold. I could see frost forming where they touched him. He didn't fight, just closed his eyes, accepting his fate. But then Camilla stirred in Mom's arms. My little sister opened her eyes. They were clear now, fully her own. She looked at the children approaching our father, and something in her face changed. Stop, she said quietly. The children paused. You're angry. I understand. What she did to you was evil. But my dad didn't hurt you. We didn't hurt you. We just wanted a home. Catalina turned to look at Camila. There is no innocence in this house. Then make there be, Camila said. She slipped from Mom's arms, walked toward the children on unsteady legs. You want revenge? Take it. But not from us, from her. She pointed at Dolores. The dead woman's expression flickered. They can't touch me. I control them. I bound them. You bound them with murder, Camila said, but I'm offering them something stronger. Justice. She held out her hand to Catalina. You showed me how you died, how she tricked you onto the railing, how she pulled the chandelier so you'd grab it, how she laughed while you choked. Don't you want her to feel that? Don't you want her to suffer like you suffered? For a long moment nothing happened. Then Catalina reached out. Her small, cold hand touched Camila's, and everything changed. The 4 children turned as one toward Dolores. Their faces transformed, no longer sad victims, but something ancient and furious. The house shuddered. The chandelier stopped rotating and hung perfectly still. No, Dolores breathed. You can't. I control you. I made you. You're mine. We were never yours, 4 voices said in unison. The children moved, fast, too fast to track. They were on Dolores in seconds, their hands passing through her body. She screamed a sound like metal tearing. Her solid form flickered, revealing what she truly was beneath. Not alive, not dead, something in between, something held together by will and dark power and 65 years of stolen life. The children pulled, each one grabbing a piece of her essence. Dolores's form began to tear, to fragment, to come apart like smoke in wind. Please, she gasped. I gave you purpose. I gave you... You gave us nothing, Catalina said, but we'll give you everything you deserve. They dragged her toward the open door beneath the stairs, toward that impossible space beyond, toward whatever waited in the darkness she'd opened all those years ago. Dolores's screams cut off abruptly as they pulled her through. The door slammed shut. The yellow light vanished. And then silence. The house exhaled. Temperature returned to normal. Lights flickered back to life throughout the rooms. The chandelier rose smoothly back to its original position at the top of the foyer and went still, completely, utterly still. For the first time since we'd moved in, it wasn't swaying. Mom collapsed, sobbing with relief. Dad limped over to us, pulling us all into a shaking embrace. Camila buried her face in my shoulder. Is it over? Mom whispered. I looked at the door beneath the stairs. Closed now, silent. The brass keys lay on the floor in front of it, as if they'd been spat out. "I think so," I said, but I was wrong. Because 3 weeks later, as we were packing to leave, we decided to sell to get out while we could. I came downstairs one morning to find Camila standing in the foyer. She was staring up at the chandelier, not moving, just staring. "Camila," I approached slowly. "You okay?" She didn't look at me. Her voice, when she spoke, was distant. "They're still here." "What?" "The children, Catalina, the others. They're still trapped. Dolores is gone, but the binding remains. The ritual she did, it can't be undone by killing her. It has to be broken." "How?" Finally, Camilla looked at me. Her eyes were sad, ancient, like she'd seen things no child should see. "Someone has to destroy the chandelier." That's when I noticed her hand. She was holding something. The wooden handle of the pole tool, the one used to open high windows and adjust curtains. The same tool we'd found in the study. The same tool Dolores had used to make Catalina grab the chandelier's chain 65 years ago. Camila put that down. "They asked me to help them," my sister said. "They're so tired, Isabella. They just want to rest. They've been trapped for so long. We'll find another way. We'll call someone, a priest, an expert, someone who—" "There is no other way." Camilla raised the pole. "It has to be destroyed, and it has to be now." She swung the tool toward the chandelier's mounting bracket. I lunged for her, but I was too slow. The pole connected with the bracket with a sound like a bell tolling. The chandelier shuddered. Then, in terrible slow motion, it began to fall. 300 years of Venetian craftsmanship, 400 kilograms of crystal and metal and chain, all of it plummeting toward the marble floor, toward Camilla, who stood directly beneath it, looking up, smiling. Time fractured. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats, yet each second stretched into eternity. The chandelier fell 400 kilograms of crystal and metal, and ancient malice dropping like a guillotine blade. Red glass caught the morning light, throwing blood-colored shadows across the walls. The chain screamed as it unspooled links clanging against each other in a sound like laughter. Camilla stood beneath it, still, serene. Her face tilted upward eyes, tracking the descent of 7 tiers of Moreno glass. Each level closer, about to crush a small body into the marble. I slammed into her from the side. We hit the floor together, rolling, my arms wrapped around her. The chandelier struck where she'd been standing a half-second before. The impact was cataclysmic, a sound like the world splitting open. Crystal exploded outward in 1,000 glittering shards. The metal frame buckled and twisted. The marble floor cracked in a spiderweb pattern, spreading 6 feet in every direction. The house shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Picture frames fell from walls throughout the house, glass, shattering in distant rooms. And underneath it all, I heard screaming. Not human screaming. Something else. Something that had lived in the chandelier for 65 years now, suddenly freed. The sound cut off abruptly. Then silence, heavy, complete. The kind of silence that comes after violence. I lay on top of Camilla, both of us gasping, covered in crystal dust and plaster. My ears rang. My shoulder throbbed where I'd hit the floor. But we were alive. "Isabella!" Camilla's voice was small beneath me. "Did it work?" I pushed myself up carefully, glass crunching under my palms. The foyer was devastated. The chandelier, that magnificent, terrible thing that had hung there for 80 years, was now a twisted ruin of metal and shattered crystal. Red glass covered every surface, glinting like drops of blood, and in the center of the destruction, something else. 4 small objects. At first I thought they were pieces of the chandelier, but as I looked closer I saw what they really were. Dolls, old ones, handmade. Each one roughly the size of a child's hand, crafted from cloth and stuffing. Their faces were stitched with black thread, crude X's for eyes, straight lines for mouths, and pinned to each one was a scrap of paper with a name written in faded ink. Maria Diego, Carmen, Catalina, poppets, binding dolls, the physical anchors for the ritual Dolores had performed. They'd been hidden inside the chandelier all along. Those are what kept them trapped, Camilla whispered. She'd crawled over to kneel beside them. As long as these existed, they couldn't move on. They were bound to this house, to that chandelier. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Mom and Dad appeared, faces white with shock, staring at the destruction. "What happened?" Dad's voice was hoarse. "We heard Jesus Christ. Are you hurt?" "We're okay," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. My hands were shaking. Adrenaline was still flooding my system, making everything feel unreal. "Camilla knocked down the chandelier." "I had to," my sister said simply. She reached for the dolls. "Don't touch those!" Mom lunged forward, grabbing Camilla's wrist. "We don't know what they'll do." "They can't do anything now. The chandelier is destroyed. The binding is broken." Camilla gently pulled free from Mom's grip and picked up the first doll, the one marked Catalina. The moment her fingers touched it, the doll crumbled, just disintegrated into dust like it had been waiting 60 years to fall apart. The other 3 dolls followed suit. One by one, they collapsed into nothing, and as each one disappeared, I felt it a shift in the air, a lightness, like pressure I hadn't known I was feeling suddenly lifted. "They're free," Camilla said. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "They're finally free." I looked around the foyer. The morning sun streamed through the windows, more sunlight than I'd seen since we'd moved in. The shadows in the corners seemed less dark. The air felt warmer. The house itself seemed to exhale, releasing something it had held clenched for decades. "Is it over?" Mom asked. The same question she'd asked weeks ago. But this time her voice held something different. Hope. I wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that destroying the chandelier had ended the nightmare. But I'd learned to be cautious. This house had taught me that. "I don't know," I admitted. We stood there in the wreckage, none of us sure what to do next. Then Dad did something unexpected. He laughed. It started as a chuckle, then grew into full-bodied laughter that bordered on hysterical. "That chandelier," he gasped between laughs, "was worth more than this entire house. We just destroyed our most valuable asset." He kept laughing, tears streaming down his face now too, but these were different from Camilla's tears. These were the tears of someone who'd been pushed beyond their breaking point and come out the other side. "We're ruined, completely, utterly ruined." "We're alive," Mom said quietly. "That's more valuable than any chandelier." The laughter died in Dad's throat. He looked at her, then at Camilla and me, then at the destruction around us. "Yeah," he said finally. "Yeah, you're right." The next 3 days were strange. Not horrifying strange like before, but unsettling in a different way. The house was quiet, too quiet. After weeks of constant phenomena, footsteps, whispers, doors opening and closing, the sudden absence of activity felt wrong, like waiting for a shoe to drop. We cleaned up the chandelier as best we could. Dad swept the crystal shards into boxes. Mom called an insurance assessor to evaluate the damage to the floor. No one mentioned the real reason the chandelier had fallen. The official story was that the mounting bracket had failed. Old age, poor maintenance, an accident waiting to happen. The assessor spent 2 hours examining the damage, taking photographs, shaking his head. "You're lucky no one was standing under it," he said. "This could have been a tragedy." If only he knew how close we'd come. On the 4th morning after the chandelier's destruction, I woke to find Camilla sitting at the kitchen table drawing. This wasn't unusual. My sister had always been artistic. But the subject matter made me pause. She was sketching the house. Our house. But different. The windows were open. Flowers grew in the garden. And in the foyer where the chandelier had hung, there was nothing. Just empty space. Light streaming down from the skylight above. "That's pretty," I said, pouring coffee. "It's how the house looks now," Camilla said without looking up. "Without them. It's lighter, happier." "You still see them? The children?" She shook her head. "Not since the chandelier broke. They're gone. Really gone this time." She finally looked at me. "But I remember everything they showed me, everything Dolores did. It's all still in my head." I sat down beside her. Maybe we should find you someone to talk to, a therapist, someone who specializes in trauma from being possessed by the ghosts of murdered children. Camilla's smile was wry, too old for her face. I don't think they have specialists for that. Camilla, I'm okay, Isabella. Really, I will be, eventually. She returned to her drawing, adding details to the garden. The children, before they left, they said thank you. They'd been trying to get someone to break the chandelier for decades, but everyone was too afraid, or they became corrupted by the house's influence and couldn't do it. But I could, because I was young enough that Dolores's power hadn't fully taken root in me yet. You could have died. I know, but I didn't. You saved me. She reached over and squeezed my hand. You always save me. I squeezed back, not trusting myself to speak. On day 5, we had a visitor. The doorbell rang at 2 p.m. I answered to find an elderly woman on the porch. Not the woman who'd given us the keys. This one was different, older. She wore a simple dress and cardigan, despite the June heat, and her eyes were sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'm Father Mendoza's housekeeper, she said without preamble. From the parish of San Juan, he asked me to deliver something to you. She held out a manila envelope thick with documents. I don't understand, I said. We didn't ask for anything from the church. Father Mendoza has been keeping records on this house for 40 years, she said. Ever since he was a young priest and heard confession from a woman named Dolores Ramirez. She confessed to murder. Multiple murders, children. But she died before he could convince her to go to the police. He's been watching this house ever since, waiting for someone to finally break the curse she placed on it. She pushed the envelope into my hands. He says congratulations, and that you should read these. You deserve to know the full story. Before I could ask anything else, she turned and was walking back to a car, idling at the curb. I took the envelope inside. The family gathered around the kitchen table as I opened it. Inside were photocopies, newspaper articles, police reports, handwritten notes, and at the top a letter in careful script to the Moreno family. If you're reading this, it means you've survived. More than that, you've succeeded where all others have failed. You've broken the binding that has plagued 1247 Calle Reforma for 65 years. I wish I could have helped you more directly, but the curse prevented it. Anyone who tried to intervene found their attempts thwarted. Phones wouldn't connect. Visits were forgotten. Even my own attempts to enter the house were blocked by forces I couldn't overcome. But you did it from the inside. And for that I am grateful, and the souls of 4 children are finally at rest. The documents in this envelope will tell you the full story of Dolores Ramirez and what she did. You may find it disturbing, but you have earned the right to know the truth. May God bless you and keep you safe. Father Miguel Mendoza. I started reading. The others read over my shoulder. And piece by piece we learned the truth. Dolores Ramirez had come to Mexico City in 1952, already in her 40s. She'd worked as a maid for wealthy families in Lomas de Chapultepec, moving from house to house every few years. She was efficient, quiet, unremarkable. Except that wherever she worked, children died. Not immediately, not obviously. But within a year or two of Dolores's employment, a child in the household would have an accident, a fall, a drowning, an unexplained illness. The deaths were spread out over years across different families, so no pattern was noticed. But Father Mendoza had noticed. He'd been assigned to the parish in 1955. Over the next 7 years, he'd presided over the funerals of 4 children from the neighborhood. 4 children whose families had all employed the same maid. When he'd tried to report his suspicions to the police, he'd been dismissed. No evidence, no proof. Just coincidence and the paranoid suspicions of a young priest. Then in August 1962, Dolores had come to confession. Father Mendoza's notes from that confession were chilling. She showed no remorse, spoke of the children as if they were ingredients in a recipe. 4 corners, she said. 4 directions. 4 souls to open the door. When I asked what door, she smiled. The door that leads down, where the old things sleep, where death itself can be cheated. She said she'd been dying. Cancer of the stomach. Doctors gave her months, but she'd found a way. Old magic, she called it. Older than the church. Older than Christ. She would bind 4 children's souls to a physical object, the chandelier in the Vega house where she'd finally completed her ritual. Their deaths would fuel her immortality. She would live forever, neither fully alive nor fully dead, sustained by the stolen life force of innocence. I told her she had to turn herself in, that she had to face justice for what she'd done. She laughed, said justice couldn't touch her. She'd already begun the transformation. She was already halfway to the other side. She left my confessional. I tried to follow to stop her, but she vanished into the crowd. I went to the police that day, filed a formal report. But when they went to the Vega house to question her, they found no trace. Dolores Ramirez had disappeared. The Vega family said she'd quit, suddenly left no forwarding address. I've been watching that house for 40 years, watching people move in full of hope and move out broken. Or worse, not move out at all. The house consumes them, and at the center of it all, that chandelier, glowing red, like a heart pumping poison through the structure. I've tried to help, tried to enter and perform an exorcism, but the house won't let me in. The door closes, the phone line cuts, I'm blocked at every turn. All I can do is wait and pray that someone strong enough, brave enough will finally end what Dolores started. The letter was dated 2 days ago. Below it were the police reports Father Mendoza had filed, articles about the missing maid, and most disturbing autopsy reports for the 4 children. All of them showed the same unusual, finding trace amounts of an unknown substance in their systems. Something organic, something that shouldn't have been there. The medical examiner in 1962 hadn't been able to identify it, but a note paperclipped to the autopsy reports written in Father Mendoza's hand said mandrake root, belladonna, hemlock, classic ingredients for binding rituals. She had been poisoning them, slowly preparing their souls for capture even before their deaths. I pushed the papers away, feeling sick. She was feeding them poison, Mom whispered, for weeks or months before she killed them, weakening their souls, making them easier to trap. That's why the chandelier was so important, I said, understanding now. It wasn't just any object. It was expensive, rare, ancient. Made from materials that had been worked by masters. The perfect vessel for what she was doing. And when she killed Catalina, Camilla added, her voice hollow, the 4th child the ritual completed, the chandelier became a prison, a battery, something that sustained Dolores's half-life while torturing 4 children's souls for decades. Dad was reading further into the documents. It says here that the Vega family sold the house 6 months after Catalina's death, moved to Spain, never came back to Mexico. Every owner after them reported problems, shadows, voices, the chandelier swaying. Most people left within a year or 2. Until Uncle Rodrigo, I said. He stayed 20 years. Why? Maybe he was stronger, Mom suggested. Or maybe. She didn't finish, but I knew what she was thinking. Maybe Rodrigo had been slowly corrupted, slowly drawn in, until he couldn't leave even if he wanted to, until the only escape was death. I thought about his journal. The progression from curiosity to fear to madness to acceptance. By the end, he hadn't been fighting anymore, just surviving, existing, trapped as surely as the children in the chandelier, just in a different way. We need to burn these, Dad said suddenly. He gathered the papers, started toward the fireplace. No, I grabbed his arm. People should know. What happened here, what Dolores did. Those 4 children deserve to have their story told. And say what, that we lived in a haunted house, that we destroyed a priceless chandelier because it was possessed, Isabella? They'll think we're insane. I don't care. Catalina and Maria and Diego and Carmen, they suffered for 65 years. The least we can do is make sure they're remembered. We argued for an hour. Eventually we reached a compromise. We'd keep the documents, but we wouldn't go public. Not yet. Not until we were safely away from this house and had time to process what had happened. That night I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs for water and found Camila standing in the foyer looking up at the empty space where the chandelier had hung. "Can't sleep either?" I asked. She shook her head. "I keep thinking about Dolores, about what she said, that justice couldn't touch her. But it did. The children pulled her through that door. She's gone. But where?" Camila turned to look at me. "Where did they take her? What's on the other side of that door?" I didn't have an answer. My sister looked back up at the ceiling. "The children showed me things in those weeks when they were in my head. They showed me what it's like to be trapped, to be aware but unable to move on, unable to find peace. It's not like being asleep. It's not like nothing. It's being awake in the dark, forever screaming with no voice, reaching with no hands. Camila, don't." That's where they sent Dolores, to the place she opened, the place she was trying to cheat. And that place is hungry. It's always been hungry. "It's been waiting behind that door for so long." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very young and very frightened. I think destroying the chandelier didn't just free the children. I think it closed the door, sealed it. Dolores is trapped on the other side now with all the other things that live in that darkness. And they're angry at her for disturbing them, for trying to use them. "Good," I said firmly. "She deserves whatever she gets." "Yeah," Camila's voice was small, "but sometimes I hear her, late at night, through the walls, screaming." A chill ran down my spine. "The door is closed," you said. "It is, but sounds can still get through. Echoes, like hearing someone shouting from very far away." She looked at me with ancient eyes. "She's being punished, and it will never ever end." I pulled my sister close, held her tight. "Then we won't listen, and we'll leave this place soon as we can. Promise, I promise." But as I held her, I couldn't shake the feeling that leaving wouldn't be as easy as we hoped. That the house, even with the chandelier destroyed and the children freed, still had one more surprise waiting for us. I was right. Day 7, after the chandelier's destruction. The moving company was scheduled to arrive the next morning. We'd sold the house at a massive loss to a developer who planned to tear it down and build something modern. We didn't care about the money. We just wanted out. That night, Dad went down to the room beneath the stairs one last time. He'd been avoiding it all week. We all had. The door remained closed, the brass keys sitting on the foyer table where they'd fallen. But Dad said he needed to check, needed to make sure there was nothing left in there that could hurt the demolition crew when they came. "It's just a room," he said when Mom protested. "The chandelier is gone. The children are free. Whatever power this place had, it's broken." He was wrong. We heard him scream at 11:47 p.m., the same time things had always started happening in this house. Some houses have rhythms, patterns built into their bones. This house's rhythm was 11:47. And even with the curse broken, the pattern remained. We ran downstairs. Dad was in the foyer, backing away from the door beneath the stairs. His face was white. His hand shook. "I opened it," he gasped. "I opened the door and what?" Mom grabbed him. "What did you see?" "Nothing. There's nothing there. The room is empty. Completely empty. The TV, the toys, the photographs, everything is gone. It's just bare walls and floor. But that's not why I screamed." He pointed at the door. "There's something written on the inside, on the back of the door, in the same handwriting as those dolls, Dolores's handwriting." We approached slowly. The door hung open, and on its interior surface, carved deep into the wood, were words in Spanish. "La puerta nunca se cierra completamente, lo que entra siempre puede regresar, esperen mi retorno." The door never fully closes. What enters can always return. Wait for my return. "She's threatening us," Mom whispered. "Even from wherever she is, she's threatening us." "No!" Camila's voice made us all turn. She'd come down the stairs silently, and now stood looking at the message with an expression of grim understanding. She's not threatening, she's warning, warning whoever comes next. What do you mean? I asked. The children took her through the door. They sealed it behind them. Dolores can't come back. But the door itself, it's still there, on the other side. And other things know about it now. Other things might try to push through. She walked to the door, placed her hand on the carved words. Dolores thought she could control the darkness, use it. But the darkness doesn't get controlled. It just waits. And eventually it consumes everything that touches it, including her. My sister looked back at us. We have to leave. And whoever buys this property has to tear it all down. Not just the house, the foundation, the ground itself. Dig it all up and salt the earth and make sure nothing can grow here again. The developer Dad started won't do that. He'll just demolish the house and build new ones. And eventually people will move into those new houses, and they'll start hearing things, seeing things, because the door is still here, under the ground, under the concrete, waiting. Then what do we do? Mom's voice was desperate. We've already sold it. The contracts are signed. We warn them, I said. We tell the developer everything. Give him Father Mendoza's documents. Make him understand what's here. He'll think we're crazy. Maybe, but we have to try. We tried. The next morning before the movers arrived, we met with the developer in his office. A man in his 50s named Santiago Vargas, all business suit and confidence. We gave him the envelope, explained what had happened, showed him the photographs of the destroyed chandelier, Uncle Rodrigo's journal, Father Mendoza's research. He listened politely, then smiled. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, he said. And I'm sure your family had a very traumatic experience in that house. Old houses can be unsettling. The sounds they make, the shadows, it can play tricks on the mind. We're not imagining this, Dad insisted. That house is dangerous. You can't just build on that land. Mr. Moreno, I've been in real estate development for 30 years. I've built on former cemetery grounds on sites where murders occurred on land that local legends said was cursed. Do you know what I've found? Nothing. Because ghosts aren't real. Curses aren't real. What's real is property value and market demand, and Lomas de Chapultepec has both in abundance. He slid the envelope back across the desk. The demolition is scheduled for next month. I'm building 4 luxury condominiums on that land. They'll be beautiful, modern, and they'll sell for triple what I paid for your property. Thank you for your concern, but I'm moving forward. We left his office knowing we'd failed. He's going to put people in danger, Mom said as we drove away. Families, children, and we can't stop him. We did what we could, Dad said, but he didn't sound convinced. That afternoon, the movers loaded our belongings into the truck. We took one last look at 1247 Calle Reforma. In daylight, with the sun streaming through the windows, it almost looked normal. Almost looked like it could have been a happy home. But I knew better. I could still see the crack in the marble floor where the chandelier had impacted. Could still smell that faint sweet rot odor that never quite went away. Could still feel the weight of all those years of suffering pressed into the walls. As we pulled away, Camilla was looking back at the house through the rear window. They're still there, she said softly. Who? I asked, though I already knew. The echoes, the memories. Everything that happened in that house, it soaked into the structure. Even if they tear it down, the ground remembers. And memory is a kind of haunting, too. We drove away and didn't look back again. 3 months later, we were living in a small apartment in Coyoacán. Cramped but clean, safe, normal. We were healing. Slowly. Camila was seeing a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. She didn't tell the therapist about the ghosts. We'd agreed that story stayed in the family, but she talked about nightmares, about feeling watched, about the guilt of having survived when others hadn't. Dad's ankle had finally healed, though the scars remained. 5 perfect fingerprints seared into his skin, a reminder he'd carry forever. Mom had gone back to teaching. found comfort in routine and the innocent questions of young students and problems that could be solved with patience and time. I'd returned to university, back to designing buildings. But now I understood something I hadn't before. Architecture isn't just about creating beautiful spaces. It's about understanding that buildings remember, that places hold energy, good and bad. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is tear something down rather than try to save it. Then in September I saw the news article. Construction halted on Lomas de Chapultepec development. I clicked through, heart pounding. The article described how demolition crews had been tearing down the house at 1247 Calle Reforma when they had made a discovery. Beneath the room under the stairs, they'd found a void space, a hollow in the foundation that shouldn't have been there. And in that space, they'd found bones. 5 skeletons, 4 children, 1 adult. The children's remains matched 4 missing persons cases from the 1950s and 1960s. Maria Soto, Diego Ruiz, Carmen Lopez, Catalina Vega. Their bodies had been hidden there all along beneath the room where their souls had been trapped. The adult skeleton would take longer to identify, but early analysis suggested a woman in her 40s, consistent with the age Dolores Ramirez would have been at the time of her disappearance. The article concluded with a quote from Santiago Vargas, the developer. Out of respect for the victims and their families, we're halting all construction indefinitely. This site will be turned over to the city for memorial purposes. I called Dad immediately. Did you see the news? I saw it. His voice was thick. They found them. The children. They've been there the whole time. At least now they can have proper burials. Their families can have closure. Yeah. A pause. But Isabella, they found Dolores too, her body. If her body was under the house this whole time, then what was it we saw? What pulled me into that room? I didn't have an answer. Still don't. The prevailing theory is that Dolores had died of her cancer shortly after completing her ritual, probably in that hidden space, and her corpse had been walled up. But her soul, her essence, had been preserved by the ritual, bound to the house just like the children, but in a different way. Sustained by their trapped energy. When we destroyed the chandelier and freed the children, we'd broken her anchor. And when they'd pulled her through that door, they'd pulled what remained of her soul into whatever darkness waited on the other side. But the question that keeps me awake at night is this. If the darkness took her soul and her body was already dead, what is she now? Still conscious? Still aware? Trapped in that hungry darkness forever? Camila says she doesn't hear the screaming anymore. Says that when they sealed the door, they cut off all connection. I want to believe her. But sometimes, late at night when the apartment is very quiet, I swear I hear it, distant, muffled, a woman's voice screaming in rage and terror and agony, a scream that will never, ever stop. 1 year later, the site at 1247 Calle Reforma had been converted into a memorial garden. 4 trees planted, 1 for each child. A plaque with their names and a simple inscription, "In memory of the innocent, may they find peace." Father Mendoza had presided over a service for them. The remains had been returned to their families, or what remained of their families after 60 years. Proper burials, proper grief, proper closure. Dolores's remains had been cremated with no ceremony, no marker. Her ashes scattered in the landfill, as close to erasure as we could manage. On the anniversary of destroying the chandelier, I went back to visit the memorial. I hadn't told my family. This was something I needed to do alone. The trees were already growing well, jacarandas, the same type that lined the streets of Lomas de Chapultepec. In a few years, they'd bloom purple and beautiful, a spot of color in memory of children who'd had their color stolen too soon. I stood there for a long time just thinking about everything that had happened, about how close we'd come to becoming permanent residents of that house ourselves. Isabella. I turned. A woman stood behind me, maybe in her 70s, leaning on a cane. Her eyes were familiar, though I couldn't place why. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No, but I knew your Uncle Rodrigo." She moved closer, gesturing at the memorial. He tried to save them, the children. He spent years trying to figure out how to break the curse. That's why he stayed so long. He couldn't leave them trapped there. You knew him well. I was his only friend. Her smile was sad. Everyone else thought he was crazy, but I believed him. I'd lost my own daughter in that house, you see, in 1978. She was visiting the owners at the time, her school friend's family. She went into the room beneath the stairs and she never came out. They found her 3 days later in a coma. She died a week after that without ever waking up. My blood ran cold. I'm so sorry. Her name was Patricia. She was 14. The woman, Patricia's mother, looked at the memorial. I've been waiting for this for 40 years, waiting for someone to finally break that curse. So thank you. Thank you for giving those children peace. And thank you for making sure no one else has to lose their daughter to that place. She started to walk away, then paused. Your uncle left something for you. Did you know that in his will? A safe deposit box. His attorney should have notified you. I never heard about any. Check. It's at Banco Nacional, box 247. He told me what's in it before he died. Said someday someone in his family would need it. I think that someone is you. She walked away before I could ask anything else. The next day I went to the bank, showed identification. A clerk brought me to the safe deposit box room, handed me a key. Inside box 247 was a leather journal. Not the one we'd found in his study, this one was different, newer. And on the cover, written in Uncle Rodrigo's careful script, for whoever breaks the curse. I opened it. The first entry was dated June 16, 2017. One day after we'd moved in. If you're reading this, it means you survived. It means you succeeded where I failed. Congratulations. And I'm sorry. Sorry that you had to go through what you've been through. Sorry that I couldn't stop it before it started. But most of all, sorry for what I have to tell you now. The chandelier was never the only cursed object in that house. My hands started shaking. Dolores created multiple binding points. The chandelier was the strongest, yes, the primary anchor. But there were others, smaller, distributed throughout the structure. Each one connected to different aspects of her ritual. I found 12 of them over 20 years, removed 11, destroyed them. But one I couldn't find. I looked for 15 years, tore apart walls, dug up floors, but it eluded me. And I knew that as long as it existed, there would always be a connection, a thread, a way back. If the chandelier has been destroyed, then the primary curse is broken. The children are free, but that final object, that last binding point, it remains. Dormant now, probably, powerless without the chandelier to fuel it, but still there. Still connected to the darkness Dolores opened, and connections work both ways. The address where I found 11 of the 12 is attached. Study them, learn the pattern, figure out where the 12th might be. Because if you don't find it, if you leave it there, then someday someone might accidentally reactivate it, might complete the circuit, might open that door again. I failed to protect my family from this curse. Please don't fail to protect yours. Rodrigo. I sat in that bank vault for an hour reading and rereading the journal. The locations of the 11 objects he'd found and destroyed. The evidence that Dolores's ritual had been even more extensive than we'd imagined. And the sick realization that it wasn't over. Not completely. There was still one object out there, hidden somewhere in the rubble and earth where 1247 Calle Reforma had once stood. One final connection to the darkness. I closed the journal, stood up, made a decision. I had to go back. Not to the house that was gone, but to the memorial site. I had to search. Had to find that last object before someone else did. Before some future construction crew unearthed it. Before some curious person picked it up and wondered what it was. Because Dolores's warning had been real, what enters can always return. As long as that 12th object existed, the door would never be fully closed. And I was the only one who knew. That night I sat my family down, told them what I'd found. Showed them Rodrigo's journal. No, Dad said immediately. Absolutely not. We left that place behind. We're done. We're not done as long as that thing exists, I argued. Don't you see, we destroyed the chandelier. We freed the children. But we didn't finish the job. And if we don't, then someone else will, Mom interrupted. Someone else's problem. Isabella, we barely survived the first time. I'm not letting you go back. The site is just a memorial garden now. There's no house, no curse, just ground and trees, and that final object buried somewhere in the dirt. And what if you find it? Camilla asked quietly. She'd been listening without speaking until now. What if you dig it up? Won't that activate it? I'd thought about that. Rodrigo destroyed the other 11. There must be a way to do it safely. He left instructions in the journal for neutralizing them. Salt, silver, fire. Old methods, but effective. Or Dad said, we could just leave it buried, let it stay lost. Eventually, time will decay it, break it down, and the connection will fade on its own. In how many years? How many decades? I shook my head. I can't live my whole life knowing it's out there, knowing that every time I hear about something strange happening in Lomas de Chapultepec, I'll wonder if it's connected, if I could have prevented it. We argued for hours. Eventually, we reached a compromise, the same pattern our family seemed to follow. I could go back to the memorial site, I could search, but not alone. Dad would come with me. And if we couldn't find the object within one day, we'd give up and let it be. One day. One chance. I agreed. We went at dawn before anyone else would be at the memorial. Brought shovels, metal detectors, Rodrigo's journal with his notes on what to look for. The memorial garden was peaceful in the early morning light. The trees swayed gently. Dew covered the grass. Birds sang. It looked nothing like the haunted house that had stood here. Nothing like the nightmare we'd lived through. Where do we start? Dad asked. I consulted the journal. Rodrigo had marked the locations of the 11 objects he'd found on a floor plan of the house. They formed a pattern, a circle around the room beneath the stairs, with one object at each point. He'd found objects in the walls, under the floors, even one buried in the garden. 11 points of a 12-point circle, all accounted for except one. There, I said, pointing. Based on the pattern, the 12th object should be directly above where the room beneath the stairs was, on the 3rd floor. Where the chandelier's mounting bracket attached to the ceiling. We moved to that spot. It was now marked with a jacaranda tree, Catalina's tree, the one planted in her memory. We're going to have to dig near the tree, I said. Not under it, but close. Dad looked uncomfortable. Feels wrong. Digging up a memorial. We'll fill it back in. No one will know. We started digging. The ground was soft, recently landscaped, not as deep as we'd feared. About 3 feet down, my shovel hit something hard. Not rock, not root, something metal. We cleared the dirt away carefully, and there it was. A box. Small, maybe 6 inches square, made of tarnished silver with symbols etched into its surface. The same kind of symbols I'd seen in photos of the chandelier's mounting bracket, protective wards or binding seals, depending on how you used them. That's it, I whispered. The 12th object. Dad reached for it. Don't touch it with your bare hands, I warned, pulling out the thick leather gloves I'd brought. Rodrigo's notes say direct contact can create a connection. I put on the gloves, lifted the box carefully. It was heavier than it looked, and warm. Even through the leather, I could feel heat radiating from it. What's inside? Dad asked. I didn't want to open it. Every instinct screamed that opening this box would be a terrible mistake, but I had to know. Had to understand what Dolores had hidden up there all those years ago. I carried the box away from the tree, set it on the grass. Said a quick prayer, something I hadn't done since childhood, then opened the lid. Inside, nestled in red velvet, was a crystal prism, about the size of my thumb. It looked like it had been cut from the chandelier itself, the same blood-red Moreno glass. But unlike the chandelier pieces that had shattered when it fell, this one was perfect, unmarred. and it glowed with internal light pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. "Is that part of the chandelier?" Dad leaned closer. "The heart of it." My voice came out hoarse. "This is what powered the whole thing. What Dolores used as the final binding point for her ritual. She hid it in the mounting bracket so that even if someone destroyed the chandelier, this would survive. This would keep the connection open." As I spoke, the pulsing grew faster. The crystal began to warm in its velvet bed, throwing red light across our faces. "We need to destroy it," Dad said urgently. "Now!" I consulted Rodrigo's journal, flipping to his instructions. Salt to purify, silver to contain, fire to cleanse. We brought all three. I made a circle of salt on the grass, placed the open silver box in the center, then took out the lighter fluid and matches we'd brought for exactly this purpose. "Wait," Dad said. He was staring at the crystal. "Do you see that?" I looked closer. Inside the crystal, shadows moved. Shapes that might have been figures, might have been faces. And they were reaching out toward us, hands pressed against the inside of the glass like prisoners begging for release. "They're still trapped," I breathed. "Even though we destroyed the chandelier, even though the children's bodies were found and buried, there's still something in there, some echo, some remnant." "Then we're doing the right thing," Dad said firmly. "Destroying this will free them completely." I hoped he was right. I doused the silver box in lighter fluid, struck a match. The moment the flame touched the fluid, the crystal shrieked. Not a sound, not exactly, but something that hit my mind directly bypassing my ears. A wave of pure rage and desperation and hunger. The crystal blazed brighter, the red light so intense I had to look away. And I heard voices, many voices, all speaking at once in a cacophony of Spanish and English and languages I didn't recognize. "Free us, so long, trapped, hungry. Please, burn." The crystal cracked, not cleanly. It shattered from within, exploding outward in a burst of red light and heat and sound. I threw my arm up, shielding my face, felt something hot streak past my cheek, then silence. I lowered my arm slowly. The silver box was a melted ruin. The crystal was gone, reduced to fine red dust that the morning breeze was already beginning to scatter. The voices had stopped, and the air felt lighter, cleaner, like a pressure I hadn't realized I was feeling had suddenly lifted. "Is it done?" Dad's voice shook. There was a cut on his forehead where a crystal fragment had hit him. Blood ran down his face, but he didn't seem to notice. "I think so." I stood up, looked around. The memorial garden looked the same as before. Birds still sang. Sun still shone. But something fundamental had changed. The last thread connecting this place to Dolores's darkness had been severed. It was finally truly over. We filled in the hole we'd dug, smoothed the grass, scattered the red dust so thoroughly that no trace remained. By the time we finished, you'd never know we'd been there. As we walked away, I looked back one last time. 4 jacaranda trees standing in a row, 4 children finally at rest. "Thank you," I whispered. And I swear, just for a moment I felt something, a presence, gentle, grateful, like a hand briefly touching my shoulder. Then it was gone. 3 years later, I graduated with honors. Got my architecture license, opened a small firm specializing in renovation and restoration with an unusual philosophy: sometimes buildings need to die. I consult with homeowners who report strange phenomena, help them determine if it's structural issues, psychological stress, or rarely something else. Most of the time it's the first two, but occasionally I find something real. A place where suffering is soaked into the walls, where darkness has taken root. And in those cases, I always give the same advice: tear it down, salt the earth, start fresh. Some people think I'm crazy. That's fine. The ones who've lived in those places understand. Dad went back to sales. We don't talk about what happened. He has nightmares, still wakes up sometimes feeling phantom fingers gripping his ankle, but he's managing. Mom retired from teaching, spends her time volunteering at a children's hospital. Says she needs to help kids who still have a chance. Make up for the ones we couldn't save sooner. And Camilla, she's 14 now. still draws, still sees things the rest of us don't, though she's learned to filter it better. She wants to be a therapist when she grows up, specialize in trauma, help people who've experienced things that can't be explained. We're okay, healing, moving forward. But I still drive past the memorial garden sometimes, check that the trees are growing well, that the plaque is clean, that the site remains undisturbed, because I know something that most people don't. The door is closed, but doors can be opened again. Dolores's ritual is broken, but rituals can be recreated. We destroyed the 12th object, but darkness is patient and persistent, and it never ever forgets. So I watch, I wait, I remember. And if something ever starts to stir in that place again, if the trees start to die, if people start reporting strange phenomena, if that familiar sweet rot smell starts to seep from the ground, I'll know. And I'll be ready to burn it all down one more time, because that's what you do when you've looked into the darkness and somehow survived. You make sure it doesn't spread. You make sure no one else has to stand beneath a fallen chandelier and wonder if this will be the moment they die. You make sure the children can rest. And you never, ever forget what hangs above your head. 6 months later, I received the letter on a Tuesday. Not an email, not a text. An actual physical letter delivered to my office in a cream-colored envelope with no return address. The postmark was smudged, unreadable. Inside, a single sheet of expensive paper, the kind that costs too much for casual correspondence. The handwriting was shaky, like someone elderly or ill had written it. Dear Miss Moreno, my name is Father Miguel Mendoza. We have never met, though I have been following your family's story with great interest and relief. I am writing because I am dying. Cancer, the doctors tell me. I have perhaps 3 months remaining. Before I go, there is something you must know. Something I could not include in the documents I sent you last year. Something too dangerous to commit to paper while I still had time left to rectify it myself. I failed. Come see me, please, before it's too late. The address below, any day between 2-4 p.m. I don't have much strength outside those hours anymore. What I have to tell you cannot wait for my death. Father Miguel Mendoza, I stared at the letter for a long time. The rational part of my brain said, ignore it. We'd closed that chapter, destroyed the 12th object. The children were free. The house was gone. We'd moved on. But the part of me that had lived in that house, that had seen what I'd seen, that part knew I had to go. Father Mendoza lived in a small apartment attached to the San Juan parish, exactly where his housekeeper had said 3 years ago. The building was old stone walls, thick enough to keep out the Mexico City heat. I rang the bell at 2:05 p.m. on a Thursday. The door opened immediately, as if he'd been waiting. Father Mendoza was not what I expected. In my mind, he'd been robust, strong, the kind of priest who could stand against darkness with faith alone. Instead, I found a frail man, probably in his 80s now, skin hanging loose on bones, eyes sunken but still sharp. He wore civilian clothes, a cardigan, and slacks, not his collar. Somehow that made him seem more vulnerable. Isabella Moreno. His voice was stronger than his body suggested. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Your letter said it was urgent. It is. Please. He gestured me inside. We don't have much time, and I have much to tell you. His apartment was sparse. A single room serving as bedroom, living area, and study. Books lined every wall, theology, history, demonology, folklore from dozens of cultures, a simple bed in the corner, a desk by the window, and on that desk a map. Not just any map, a map of Mexico City, specifically Lomas de Chapultepec, with red pins stuck into various locations, dozens of them. I've been tracking patterns for 45 years, Father Mendoza said, settling into the desk chair with visible pain. Ever since Dolores Ramirez confessed to me in 1962. I told you she killed 4 children. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. He pointed to the map. Each red pin had a date written beside it. Dolores worked as a maid in Lomas de Chapultepec from 1947 to 1962, 15 years. In that time, she worked for 12 different families. And in 11 of those households, children died under mysterious circumstances. My stomach dropped. 11. 4 were used for the primary ritual, the one bound to the chandelier, Maria, Diego, Carmen, and Catalina, but 7 others. He pointed to different pins. 7 other children died in ways that seemed like accidents but weren't. Falls, drownings, unexplained illnesses. I believe Dolores was practicing, perfecting her technique, learning how to harvest souls. Why didn't you tell us this before? Because I had no proof, only suspicion. The deaths were spread over 15 years across different households. No one connected them. No one except me, and I was just a young priest whose concerns were dismissed. He turned to look at me and his eyes were haunted. But 3 months ago, something happened that confirmed my worst fears. He pulled out a file folder, slid it across the desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, all recent. Mysterious death in Lomas de Chapultepec condo, January 2020. Second death in new development raises questions. February 2020. Residents flee luxury building after third fatality. March 2020. I scanned the articles quickly. 3 deaths in 3 months, all in the same building, all children, all ruled as accidents, a fall from a balcony, an unexplained drowning in a bathroom, a child found strangled in their bed with no signs of struggle. "Where's this building?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Father Mendoza pointed to the map. His finger landed on a familiar address, 1247 Calle Reforma. The memorial garden was torn up last year. A new developer, not Vargas, he sold the land after the bodies were found, built luxury condominiums. 4 units. 12 families moved in last October. My hands started shaking. That's impossible. We destroyed the chandelier. We destroyed the 12th object. We broke the binding completely. You broke Dolores's binding, yes. But you couldn't erase what she'd done to that land. 58 years of dark ritual, 11 practice murders, 4 binding murders, decades of trapped souls screaming in the darkness. That kind of corruption doesn't just disappear when you destroy the physical objects. It soaks into the earth itself, into the memory of the place. He pulled out another document. This one looked older pages, yellowed and brittle. I've been researching the history of that land. Before the house was built in 1942, do you know what stood there? I shook my head. Nothing. It was empty land. But before that, in the 1800s, it was a cemetery. Not a public one, a private burial ground for a wealthy family. When Lomas de Chapultepec was developed for residential use, the bodies were supposed to be exhumed and relocated. But records show the exhumation was incomplete. At least 30 bodies were left behind, buried under what would become the foundation of your uncle's house. The room felt colder. You're saying Dolores chose that specific location because it was already a grave site? I'm saying she chose it because the boundary between life and death was already thin there. And when she performed her ritual, she didn't just trap 4 children. She opened a door that had been sealed for 100 years. A door that leads to where the dead go when they can't move on. Father Mendoza leaned forward, his voice dropping. Isabella, when you destroyed that crystal, the 12th object, you severed Dolores's control. You freed the 4 children she'd bound, but the door itself, the door she opened, that remained dormant, waiting. Until someone built on the land again, I finished. Until families moved in. Until children. Until there was fresh energy to feed on. The door is hungry, Isabella. It's been hungry for 60 years. And now that it's been disturbed again, awakened by new construction, new life, new innocence, it's starting to pull. I stood up abruptly. Then we have to warn them. The family's living there. We have to make them leave. I already tried. Father Mendoza's voice was heavy with defeat. I went to the building 2 weeks ago, spoke to the property manager, told her about the history. She called me a senile old man peddling superstition, had security escort me out. Then we go to the families directly. We tell them about the deaths. They know about the deaths. They don't care. The building offered them reduced rent after the incidents. Most of them are young families struggling financially just like you were. They can't afford to leave, and they don't believe in ghosts. I sank back into my chair. Then what do we do? You do what you did before. You go in, you find what's pulling those children through, and you close it. Permanently this time. I'm not a priest. I'm not an exorcist. I'm just an architect who got lucky once. You're someone who survived. Someone who looked into that darkness and didn't flinch. Someone who destroyed what needed destroying. He reached across the desk, grabbed my hand with surprising strength. I'm too old, too sick, too weak to do this myself. I've been fighting this for 45 years and I'm losing. But you're young, strong. You have something I never had. What's that? You've been inside. You know what it feels like, what it sounds like, what it smells like. You'll recognize it when you're close. He pressed something into my palm, a key, small, brass, old. What is this? The master key to 1247 Calle Reforma. I acquired it from the property management company. Don't ask how. You'll need it to access the basement. That's where it is. Where what is? Father Mendoza pulled out one final document. A architectural drawing. Original blueprints for the house that used to stand on that land. And there marked in red ink a space I recognized. The room beneath the stairs. Except in these blueprints there was another room marked beneath that one. A sub-basement. Hidden, not on any official records. I found this in the archives of the original construction company, Father Mendoza said. The builders in 1942 found something when they were digging the foundation. A stone structure, very old, pre-colonial, they thought. They should have reported it. Should have called archaeologists, but they were behind schedule over budget, so they just built over it, sealed it up, left it there. What kind of structure? The foreman's notes describe it as a shrine or altar. Circular stone chamber about 12 feet across with a depression in the center. The depression was full of bones when they found it, human bones, centuries old. My mouth went dry. A sacrifice site. The Aztecs and other Mesoamerican cultures performed child sacrifices at certain locations, places they considered gateways to Mictlan, the underworld. When Dolores performed her ritual, she wasn't creating something new. She was reactivating something very, very old, something that had been waiting under that ground for 500 years. I looked at the key in my hand. And you think this is still down there, still active. I think 3 children have died in 3 months. I think their souls are being pulled through the same door Dolores opened. And I think if someone doesn't stop it, more will follow. Father Mendoza slumped back in his chair, exhausted. I've spent 45 years trying to fight this, praying, researching, warning people, but I've failed. Those 3 children died on my watch. I have to know before I die that someone will finish what I couldn't. I closed my fist around the key. I'll need help. I can't do this alone. Take whoever you trust, but don't wait. The deaths are accelerating. The first one happened in January, the second in February, the third in March. If the pattern continues, the fourth will happen in April. I checked my phone, April 17th. We have less than 2 weeks. Then you'd better hurry. I called an emergency family meeting that night. Dad, Mom, and Camila all came to my apartment. I told them everything Father Mendoza had said, showed them the articles about the deaths, the blueprints showing the hidden chamber. The silence after I finished was heavy. No. Dad's voice was flat, final. Absolutely not. We are not going back to that place. 3 children are dead. And that's a tragedy. But it's not our responsibility. We did our part. We destroyed the chandelier. We found the 12th object. We're done. We're not done. We never finished. We broke Dolores' ritual, but the door she opened is someone else's problem. Dad stood up face flushed. Isabella, we almost died, all of us. Camila was possessed. I still have nightmares. Your mother can't walk past a chandelier without having a panic attack. We paid our price. We are not going back. Then more children will die. That's not on us. His voice cracked. We're not responsible for every bad thing that happens in that cursed place. We can't save everyone. Mom put a hand on his arm. "Ricardo, sit down, please." He sat, but his jaw was clenched, hands balled into fists. Mom turned to me. "Isabella, I understand why you want to help, but your father's right. We're not equipped for this. We're not exorcists or priests or ghost hunters. We're just a family that survived something terrible. Walking back into danger won't change what's already happened. But it might prevent what happens next. Or it might get us all killed." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I'm sorry, mija, but I can't support this. I can't lose you." I looked at Camila. My little sister was 14 now, but her eyes were still too old. She'd been quiet through the whole conversation, just listening. "What do you think?" I asked her. Camila was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I think you're going to go whether we want you to or not, because that's who you are." "You can't leave it alone when people need help." She was right, we both knew it. But I also think, Camila continued, that you shouldn't go alone, because that's how people die in horror movies. They go back to the haunted place alone and they don't come back. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I'll go with you." She held up a hand to stop Mom's protest. "Not because I want to, not because I'm not terrified, but because Isabella's right. 3 children are dead, and I remember what it felt like to be trapped, to have something in my head that wasn't me, to be screaming and no one could hear." She looked at our parents. "If there are kids being pulled through that door right now, trapped in the dark screaming, we're the only ones who understand what they're going through. We're the only ones who might be able to help." Dad was shaking his head. "I can't let you two." "You can't stop us," Camila said quietly. "I'm sorry, Papa, but this is something we have to do." Another long silence, then Mom sighed. "If you're going," she said, "then we're all going. We stay together. We went through hell together before, and if we're walking back into it, we do it as a family." Dad looked at her, betrayed. "Patricia, they're our daughters, Ricardo. They're going with or without us. Would you rather they face it alone?" I could see the war happening behind Dad's eyes. Fear versus love. Self-preservation versus family. Finally, he slumped forward, head in his hands. "I hate this," he whispered. "I hate everything about this." "I know," Mom said, pulling him close. "So do I." We spent the next 3 days preparing, not like last time when we'd stumbled into horror unprepared and ignorant. This time we researched, we planned, we armed ourselves with knowledge. I pulled every book I could find on Mesoamerican sacrifice rituals, on Mexican folklore, about the underworld, on methods for closing spiritual doorways. Most of it was academic, dry, probably useless, but buried in the scholarly language I found patterns, rules. The old gods had structure. They followed laws, even if those laws seemed alien to modern understanding. Camila used her therapy sessions differently now. Instead of just talking about her trauma, she asked her therapist about techniques for staying grounded when faced with overwhelming fear. Breathing exercises, visualization, mantras, anything that might help her stay herself if something tried to get in her head again. Mom reached out to Father Mendoza, asking for specific blessings, prayers, and holy objects that might offer protection. He provided them gladly rosaries blessed in Jerusalem, holy water from 3 different sacred sites, a small vial of oil used in exorcisms. "I wish I could go with you," he told her over the phone, "but my body won't allow it. These are the best weapons I can provide." And Dad did what Dad did best. He made a plan, not a spiritual plan, a practical one. Emergency exits, communication protocols, a timeline. "We go in at 2 p.m. on Saturday. If we're not out by 5 p.m., our attorney has instructions to call the police." Backup plans for the backup plans. It was his way of coping, of feeling like he had some control in a situation where control was an illusion. Saturday, April 25th. We stood outside the building that had been constructed on the cursed ground of 1247 Calle Reforma. It was beautiful. 4 stories of modern glass and steel. Balconies with tasteful plants, a lobby with a water feature. Nothing about it suggested the horror beneath, but I could feel it. The moment I stepped onto the property, I felt that familiar cold pressure, that sense of being watched. The air tasted wrong, that sweet rot smell faint but present. "You feel it too?" Camilla asked quietly. "Yeah." Mom and Dad exchanged glances. They felt nothing, but they believed us. I used Father Mendoza's key to access the basement. The building had a parking garage on the lowest level, but beyond that, behind a locked maintenance door, was an older space. Stone walls, low ceiling. This was part of the original house's foundation. The builders had incorporated it, rather than completely demolishing it. And there in the far corner, hidden behind a water heater, was another door. Newer than the stone walls around it, but still old. Wood. Heavy. With symbols carved into it, not the European-style symbols from Dolores's ritual, but older. Pre-colonial. Circles and dots and lines that might have been writing or might have been warnings. That wasn't on the blueprints, Dad said. "Because someone added it after," I said, running my fingers over the carvings. "The construction crew in 1942. They found the sacrifice chamber, and instead of sealing it properly, they just put a door in front of it and hoped that would be enough. I tried the handle. Locked. But not with a modern lock, with something else. A mechanism I didn't understand." Camilla stepped forward, examining it. "It's a puzzle lock. You have to press the symbols in the right order." "How do you know that?" "Because I've seen it before, in my dreams. The children, the ones who died recently, they've been trying to show me." Her hand moved over the symbols, pressing 3 of them in sequence. Click. The door swung open. Beyond it, stairs led down into darkness. Stone steps worn smooth by centuries. The smell hit us immediately, decay and earth and something else. Something that made my hindbrain scream danger. "Stay close," Dad said, pulling out a heavy flashlight. "Stay together. If anyone says we need to leave, we leave. No arguments." Agreed. We agreed. We descended. The chamber at the bottom was exactly as Father Mendoza's documents had described. Circular, stone, about 12 feet across, and in the center a depression carved into the floor, 6 feet wide, 3 feet deep. A bowl designed to catch blood. But that wasn't what made us stop. It was the shadows. They moved wrong, independent of our flashlights, stretching, reaching. And in those shadows I saw faces, small faces, children's faces, dozens of them, centuries of them. All the sacrifices performed here, all the souls that had been pulled through this gateway over hundreds of years. And at the very bottom of that stone bowl, a crack, a fissure in the earth, where all those souls had been fed into the darkness below. "That's the door," Camilla whispered. "That's what Dolores opened wider when she did her ritual. She reactivated this place, made it hungry again." As if in response, the shadows surged, the faces became clearer. And I heard them, dozens of voices speaking in languages I didn't know, begging, crying, screaming. Mom pulled out her rosary, started praying in rapid Spanish. Dad positioned himself between us and the stone bowl, as if his body could shield us from spiritual threat. But it was Camilla who stepped forward. "We're here to close it," she said to the darkness, to the faces, to whatever listened in that ancient place. "We're here to seal this door so no more children can be taken." The shadows paused. The voices quieted. And then I heard it. A single voice, small, recent, speaking English with a Mexican accent. "Help us. Please help us. We can't get out." "The 3 children," I breathed. "The ones who died. They're here, trapped." "Not just them," Camilla said, still staring into the darkness. "All of them. Everyone who was ever sacrificed here. Everyone Dolores took. They're all still here on the other side of that crack, screaming to get out." "Then we pull them out," I said. "We can't." Father Mendoza's voice came from behind us. We all jumped. The priest stood at the bottom of the stairs, leaning heavily on a cane, his face pale and drawn. He shouldn't have been able to make it down those stairs, but he had. "I told you I was dying," he said with a weak smile. "I lied about the timeline. I have days, not months. So I decided to spend them here, making sure you had what you needed. Father, you shouldn't have. What I should have done, he interrupted, was come here 45 years ago, right after Dolores confessed. I should have found this place and sealed it then, but I was afraid. I failed those children. He moved past us, approaching the stone bowl. I won't fail again. He pulled something from his pocket, a small leather-bound book, very old. The pages were handwritten in Latin. This is a ritual of sealing, not Christian, older than Christianity, adapted from Aztec practices recorded by Spanish priests who witnessed them. It requires... He paused, and I saw sadness in his eyes. It requires a guardian, someone to stand watch over the door, to make sure it never opens again. A guardian? Mom asked. What does that mean? Father Mendoza looked at each of us in turn. It means someone stays, someone anchors the seal with their own soul. They become part of the door, holding it closed from the inside. Silence. Then, no. Dad's voice was steel. No one's staying. We'll find another way. There is no other way. The door is already open. The only question is whether we seal it or leave it to consume more children. Father Mendoza opened the book, began reading the Latin text. The ritual is already prepared. I've been working on it for months. All it needs is someone to accept the burden. Then let it be me, I said. Everyone started talking at once, but I raised my voice over them. I'm the one who came here. I'm the one who couldn't leave it alone. Let me finish it. Isabella, no. Mom grabbed my arm. You have your whole life ahead of you, Dad said desperately. You can't. Neither can any of you. I pulled free gently. Mom, you're a teacher. You help children every day. Dad, you're finally getting back on your feet. And Camila, I looked at my sister. Camila, you're going to help so many people someday. You can't give that up. Neither can you, Camila said fiercely. You're going to design buildings, beautiful buildings, safe buildings. You're going to make sure places like this never happen again. Not if more children die because we left this door open. Father Mendoza cleared his throat. The guardian doesn't have to be alive. We all looked at him. He smiled sadly. I told you, I'm dying. Days, maybe a week. And I've been preparing for this, preparing to finally make up for my failure 45 years ago. Father, you can't. I can. I will. It's already decided. He moved to the edge of the stone bowl, placed his hand on the rim. When I perform this ritual, my soul will bind to this place. I'll hold the door closed forever. And when my body dies in a few days, I'll simply stay. Continue the work I started decades ago. That's not forever, I said. Souls can weaken, fade. What happens in 100 years when you're not strong enough to hold it anymore? Then we'll need another guardian. Father Mendoza looked at me. And I suspect you'll be ready by then. You'll have lived a full life, helped countless people, and when your time comes, you can choose to take over, continue the watch. You're asking me to promise. I'm asking you to remember, to pass on the knowledge, to make sure someone is always ready to stand watch over this door. He opened the book again. Now, we don't have much time. The door knows we're here. It's getting restless. As if to prove his point, the shadows in the stone bowl began to writhe more violently. The crack at the bottom glowed with a sickly green light. And from deep below I heard something moving, something massive, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Father Mendoza began to chant in Latin. His voice was weak but steady, each word carefully pronounced. As he spoke, he pulled out a knife, old ceremonial with symbols matching those on the door above. "Father, what are you doing?" Mom's voice rose in panic. "The seal requires blood," he said simply. "My blood, given freely, a life for a life, a guardian to replace all those who were sacrificed unwillingly." He drew the knife across his palm. Blood welled up, dripped into the stone bowl. Where it touched, the stone began to glow. The shadows recoiled. The voices of the trapped souls grew louder, some screaming, some praising, some simply relieved. Father Mendoza continued chanting. With each word, the glow spread. The crack in the bottom of the bowl began to seal, slowly, inch by inch. The green light from below dimmed, and then something pushed back. The massive thing below whatever ancient hunger lived at the bottom of that door. It didn't want to be sealed. It surged upward, and the shadows in the chamber exploded outward, becoming solid, becoming hands, reaching for all of us. "Get back!" Dad yelled, pushing Mom and Camila toward the stairs. But the shadows were faster. They wrapped around Father Mendoza, tried to pull him into the bowl. He dropped the knife, grabbed the rim of the stone, held on with failing strength. "The ritual," he gasped. "Someone finish the ritual." I lunged for the book he'd dropped. The pages were in Latin, a language I barely understood, but I could read, I could speak, and I could try. I began reading where he'd left off. The words felt heavy in my mouth, like they had weight, like speaking them changed reality in some fundamental way. The shadows released Father Mendoza, turned toward me instead. They coiled around my legs, my waist, cold and solid and wrong. But I kept reading, kept speaking. Kept feeding the seal with my voice since I couldn't feed it with my blood. Camila joined in. She didn't know Latin either, but she read the phonetic sounds matching my rhythm. 2 voices instead of 1, stronger. The seal spread faster. The crack closed more. The shadows began to thin, but it wasn't enough. The words required power, and neither Camila nor I had that. We were just speaking syllables. The meaning, the force behind them that required faith, conviction, certainty. Father Mendoza pulled himself up. His palm still bled freely into the bowl, feeding the seal drop by drop. He began to chant again, his voice joining ours. And this time, I felt it, the shift, the click of something falling into place. The 3 of us spoke together, Latin and Spanish in pure intention, woven into a command that reality itself had to obey. By blood freely given, by souls freely pledged, by guardians who choose this burden, this door is sealed, this gateway is closed. Let no more pass through, from now until the world's end. The crack at the bottom of the bowl slammed shut. Not gradually. All at once, like a door being slammed in the face of something massive that had been trying to push through. The shadows dissolved into nothing. The green light vanished. The voices of the trapped souls, all of them, centuries of them, let out one final collective sigh. And then silence. Real silence, not the heavy, oppressive silence of a place holding its breath, but the clean, empty silence of a place that's finally at peace. Father Mendoza collapsed beside the bowl. I rushed to him, turned him over. He was still breathing, but barely. His face was gray, his lips blue. "Did it work?" he whispered. I looked at the bowl. The crack was gone, completely sealed over as if it had never existed. The stone felt warm under my hand instead of cold, and I couldn't feel that pressure anymore. That sense of being watched, it was gone. It worked. He smiled. "Good, good." His eyes found mine. "Remember Isabella, in 100 years. Someone must watch." "I'll remember," I promised. "I'll make sure someone knows. Someone will always be ready." "Thank you." His eyes closed, his breathing slowed. "Thank you for finishing what I couldn't." Father Miguel Mendoza died there in that ancient chamber, his hand still resting on the rim of the stone bowl. His blood had sealed the door. His death had anchored the guardian seal. And somewhere in whatever comes after, I hope he finally found peace. We called it in as a natural death, which it was, an elderly priest with terminal cancer who'd pushed himself too far. The autopsy confirmed it. The building management never knew we'd been in the chamber. We sealed that door behind us before we left, and I destroyed Father Mendoza's key. The death stopped. No 4th victim in April. No 5th in May. The families in the building noticed the change. The air felt lighter, they said. Cleaner. The shadows in corners didn't seem as dark. One by one, they stopped breaking their leases. Not because of fear, but because good opportunities came up elsewhere. Better jobs, better apartments. Within a year, the building was empty again. The developer, spooked by the pattern, sold the property to the city. It's a park now, a small one, just a few trees and benches. A plaque commemorates Father Miguel Mendoza, beloved priest who dedicated his life to helping children, if they only knew how literally true that was. Present day. I'm writing this in 2023, 6 years after we sealed the door. 3 years after I received Father Mendoza's journal with his final instructions. I keep his letter in my desk. Read it whenever I need to remember why I do what I do. The last thing he ever wrote me composed in the weeks before he performed that ritual, Isabella. If you're reading this, the seal worked. I'm gone. And you're left with knowledge you never asked for. You'll be tempted to forget, to move on, to pretend that night never happened. Don't. Every 100 years the seal will weaken. Not break, I made sure of that, but weaken. And when it does, it will need to be renewed. Someone will need to stand watch. Someone will need to be the guardian. You're young now. You have time. Live your life. Help people. Be happy. But when you're old, when you've done everything you wanted to do, when your time is coming to an end anyway, remember there's a door that must stay closed. Remember there are children who must never be sacrificed again. Remember that some burdens are too important to put down even when they're heavy, and pass this knowledge on to someone you trust, someone strong, someone who understands what's at stake. The guardian must never be alone. The knowledge must never be lost. This is my legacy, and now it's yours too. Watch over them, Isabella, the living and the dead alike. Miguel, I keep his journal locked in a safe, along with all of Uncle Rodrigo's documents, and my own notes from everything we experienced. A complete record of what happened, what we did, and what must be done in the future. When I'm old, when I've lived the life Father Mendoza wanted me to live, I'll make my choice, whether to become the next guardian or to pass that burden to someone else who's ready. I don't know yet what I'll decide, and I have decades before I need to know. But I think about it, on quiet nights, when I drive past that park. When I see children playing on the grass above where the stone chamber lies sealed and dormant and guarded by a dead priest's eternal vigil. This morning I received a letter, hand-delivered to my office, cream-colored envelope, no return address, inside a single sentence in handwriting I didn't recognize. The door remembers. The door waits. The door knows your name, no signature, no explanation, just that. I should be terrified, and part of me is. But a larger part, the part that stood in that chamber and helped seal the door, the part that promised Father Mendoza I would remember, that part just thinks good. Let it remember. Let it wait. Let it know my name, because I remember too, and I'm watching. And when my time comes to stand guard, I'll be ready. Until then, I build. I design. I help families find safe places to live. I consult on buildings that feel wrong and help people understand when a place needs to be torn down rather than renovated. And I live fully, completely, the way Father Mendoza wanted me to, the way the 4 children Catalina, Maria, Diego, and Carmen never got to. Because that's the other side of horror. That's the thing you learn when you survive something that should have killed you. You don't just survive, you live. Loudly, defiantly, joyfully. You make sure their suffering meant something. You make sure you're worthy of the second chance you got when they didn't. You look up at the chandelier, metaphorical or real, and you refuse to let it fall. And if someday it does fall, if someday the darkness comes again, if someday you have to make the choice between your life and someone else's, you know what to do. You've always known. Because some houses teach you lessons you never forget. And 1247 Calle Reforma taught me the most important one: stand watch, hold the door closed, protect the innocent, no matter the cost. Author's note: the building at 1247 Calle Reforma no longer exists. In its place is a small park. If you visit, you'll find it peaceful, quiet. Children play there without fear, but if you dig deep enough, if you know where to look, you'll find it. A stone chamber, a sealed bowl, a door that must never be opened, and if you're very quiet, very still, you might hear it. A voice, an old priest praying in Latin, keeping watch, holding the darkness at bay. He's not alone. He'll never be alone again. Someone is always watching, someone remembers, and the door stays closed.